Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto accidentally revives Kaguya part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Otsutsuki Kaguya had been watching. For 7 years now, that was all she had been doing. She was little more than a passive observer of the truth. At first, watching was all she had been able to do. It was hardly what one would call ideal, but that was the very nature of her resurrection, in that it hadn't been ideal. It was imperfect, incomplete, in the same way those disgusting humans that would taint her garden world were incomplete, so now was she. Kaguya loathed them, for they had stolen everything from her. Sealed her to the moon for over 1,000 years. Then they forgot about her. That was their first mistake, for she was not something that should be forgotten. It was careless of them. Foolish, even. To think she was some existence so little as to be tossed away from collective thought was the height of incompetence. She, which had once been known as the Rabbit Goddess and later an Oni, was forgotten. And she would make them pay for it, because while they may have forgotten, she had not. Her will had not. It had gone by many names over the years. Preferring to think of itself as her son, it would be more accurate to have called it her shadow. It had worked tirelessly for her resurrection, and it had finally succeeded, but only in a sense. The shadow knew that in order to restore her, numerous conditions had to be met. So it had secretly been gathering those things over time. Her true son, Hagoromo, had split up her chakra into 9 pieces. So her will collected most of those pieces, not enough that anyone would notice, just mere slivers of them from the Jinchuriki hosts they inhabited. It had been enough. The reason why is because alone those pieces of Biju chakra, her chakra, was only a single piece of the equation. Equally important were the eyes. Her son knew she needed those eyes and so had destroyed his own upon death. However, what he failed to foresee was the actions of his own children. For he also had 2 sons. One of them Indra, the other Azura. Those 2 would conflict with one another for centuries and over the course of many reincarnations. Until one day, one of those reincarnates got an idea. No, it wouldn't be right to say he got an idea. He had been fed an idea. By her very own shadow, Indra's reincarnation stole a piece of flesh from Azura's, and by grafting it upon himself, he finally awakened those eyes. Even then, it wasn't enough. For him it was too late, and he perished soon after having accomplished this task. For the shadow, it was the perfect opportunity. One they had been waiting over 1,000 years for. Taking the eyes, Rinnegan, it implanted them inside itself. Now all the pieces were nearly in place. It had 8 slivers of chakra from the Biju and the Rinnegan eyes cultivated by a reincarnation of Indra. The only thing left was to get the last piece, the Kyubi, strongest Biju of them all. Once it had the merged chakra of all 9 beasts, incomplete as that may be, it would then place the eyes once more in another host. Since the last one had been Indra, this time it would be Azura that they chose. As fate would have it, those 2 things coalesced. Azura's newest reincarnation became the Kyubi Jinchuriki on the night of his birth. Even so, her will couldn't be hasty. They had waited 1,000 years, it wouldn't hurt to wait 5 more. Which is exactly the amount of time that it waited. On the child's 5th birthday, her shadow made its move. Not in a way that anyone ever realized. For the resurrection to be complete, time would be necessary. So it had to give Azura's reincarnation, Uzumaki Naruto, these gifts in a way that no one would immediately recognize. In order to do this, it merged itself with Naruto's shadow. Her will, her own shadow became his. Along with all the things it had gathered. All these things mixed together, and became one. Her will couldn't possibly maintain itself amongst such a vortex, and so even that became mere nothing. And from that nothing she was reborn, a mere child. That was right, her form had taken the shadow of its host. So in appearance she may have been much like she had desired, long white hair, pale skin, even reclaiming her ceremonial robes. However, she was small. Inhabiting a 5-year-old had been their mistake, because his shadow only allowed them to take the shape of another 5-year-old. A miscalculation. It was no matter. She would leave, hide herself away in the forest until one day she reclaimed her full adult form. This imperfect resurrection left her without most of her power, so she would need time to recover that anyways. That was what she thought. Her second miscalculation had been assuming she could leave at all. Of course she couldn't, she realized only too late. She had no shadow. That meant there was no place for her under the light of the sun, nor even the moon which just reflected its light. She was trapped, bound to the shadow of Azura's incarnation. Even under such circumstances, she did not panic. There was no need for worry, after all. Even stuck in this shadow, her plans didn't have to change. In time she would achieve adult form and her power would return. That was what she believed, her third miscalculation. For she had placed her powers inside a former Jinchuriki. So when she replaced Kyubi, she had done so in the most literal sense possible. That meant her power was to be held back, kept in check and for use by none other than Uzumaki Naruto himself. A mere boy of 5 years old, so for the next 7 years she could only watch. Watch as he aged, becoming a prepubescent man while she did not change. Her chakra returned, but only enough to fill the body of the 5-year-old-like container she was now trapped in. In a sense, it was enough. Even in her weakened state, she was far more powerful than most adults, with perhaps few exceptions. Despite this, it wasn't enough to break free from the shadow. Watching might not have been her only option, but when she considered the alternatives, it was the only thing she desired. What would she do if not watch? Speak with Uzumaki Naruto? No, she would not sully her voice by giving him the chance to hear it. After all, he was just a mere human. A thief like all the rest of them, who had stolen her chakra. She had nothing to gain from trying to communicate with him. It was these thoughts that Kaguya assumed she could hold on to. That she could somehow be an impartial juror long enough for something about her situation to change. This was her final miscalculation, for she had forgotten, but she was once a mother. Even in this 5-year-old body, those instincts did not disappear. She thought she had destroyed them long ago, when she had resolved herself to fight her own children. However, being in Naruto's shadow changed that, and watching him reminded her of all those things she thought she had discarded. This was the humanity's second mistake, that they would dare place all their anger, cowardice, and malice on the shoulders of one small boy ignorant of sin. He was blamed for the actions of the demon fox, a once malevolent creature given shape by chakra and for a time sealed inside him. The arrogance of man was thinking that meant the two were one and the same. That arrogance led them to acting out all of their ugliest desires and wills. Uzumaki Naruto was scorned, cursed, beaten, neglected, and hated with the weight of a full village. No matter where he turned, there was no salvation that could possibly be found. The ones who had promised to protect him had abandoned their posts. Those who didn't resent him merely watched from afar, and those who were ignorant of it chose to remain that way, because their ignorance was truly a form of bliss. He was in hell, all alone in the darkness with no one to help him. That was why Kaguya would wait no longer for something to change. Watching Naruto reminded her of many things. Of her children when they had been his age. Of herself when she had been scorned by the people of this new world she escaped to. Of her own desire to just be loved. Before she had even realized it, Kaguya's plan had changed. With it, so too did her fate. She was no longer the woman seeking to reclaim everything for herself. Instead, she would just settle for revenge. Against all those who sought to keep her imprisoned and those who would harm the master of her shadow. The time to enact that change was now. She would watch no longer from his shadow. That was because the last straw was here, Naruto laying on his side in some back alley. It was hardly poorly lit, orange lights dancing in from just off the main road. It was the height of the evening nightlife. Many people passed by the alley, their shadows coming and going as they hurried past without a care for what was happening inside. Even if they didn't know, not a single one of them would have stopped to help. That was just how they all were. Wohoo! A younger man yipped in joy, the toe of his boot drilling into the young Naruto's ribcage. The young blonde let out a cough, blood spraying from his mouth and staining the already garbage-filled pavement. This is great stress relief. I might just keep him as a punching bag. A second man cooed with laughter, stomping down on the downtrodden boy's calf with his heel. I've been waiting a long time for my crack at him, damn fox. The third and final man of the despicable trio was digging through the trash, searching for something. This will do. He finally seemed to decide, pulling out an old and rusted pipe from deep within the darkness of the garbage. Naruto could not have possibly seen what it was, but he heard the metallic clinks as the man tested it out against the brick walls. The sound was almost grating, echoing vibrantly inside the small alley and out into the street. Yet not a single person paid those noises any mind. No one was coming to save him from out there. Is this kid really training at the ninja academy? The first one asked again, continuing to kick and stomp at Naruto as he talked. He hasn't even tried fighting back. This is too easy. He knows he can't. The one brandishing the pipe crouched down, licking his teeth as he leered over the beaten blonde. Don't you little hellspawn? He then rose up to his full height, placing the tip of his foot down on Naruto's cheek. No one cares if we beat on you, but if you hit back well, that's it for you. He raised the bar over his head, muscles tensing as he prepared to bring it down. That's far enough. Otsutsuki Kaguya demanded, her voice coming simultaneously from everywhere around them and yet nowhere at once. The fuck? The three men spun around, looking for the source of this new voice. None of them saw her as she emerged. No, perhaps they had seen her, but it was impossible for their minds to understand what was really happening. That's how outside the realm of possibility Kaguya's first emergence was. The lights outside had cast the shadow of Naruto's prone form up against the nearby dumpster the metal pipe had just been dug out of. Floating up from that shadow now was Kaguya herself. Standing at even full height, she couldn't have been much more than 100 centimeters. Her long white hair was taller than she was, extending down and into the shadow, unable to come out completely. Atop her head was two horns, almost giving her the appearance of a rabbit. A Hyuga? One of the men asked, finally locating her. He was mistaken, of course. Kaguya was no Hyuga, one of the elite ninja clans located within the village. She was much older and far more ancient than that. Even so, he wasn't mistaken that she did share their Byakugan eyes. Before her imperfect resurrection she had a third eye, but that would not open. Not in this incomplete form, just a brat. The man holding the pipe said, still positioning it above his head as if to swing it at any given moment. I don't know where you came from, kid, but get lost. This doesn't involve you. Run. The raspy voice of Naruto chimed in. He could barely see her, the skin around one of his eyes swollen shut. The other blue orb was partially pressed against the dirty alley pavement, tears slowly leaking out. Even so, he called out to her in an attempt to protect her. To not get her involved in this fight. In a situation like this, he would care about others more than himself, which was precisely the problem, and why Kaguya would deal with this right now. Thou concern is unneeded. Be silent while we eradicate these vermin. She spoke to Naruto, and Naruto alone. To someone such as Kaguya, even the fact that humans as lowly as the others had heard her voice was in a way tainting it, as if somehow making her more impure for allowing them to interact on the same plane as she existed in. That didn't matter, for she was about to erase them anyways. What the hell was that, you bitch dash? 3 small thunks cut the man off before he could say anything more. None of them had realized it, but Kaguya had already prepared her attack while she was talking to Naruto. For her it was as simple as raising a single arm, pointing at them with her hand curved into the shape of a finger gun. Then from the tip of her finger, a gray bone had shot out, tearing through her own flesh as it did. She had done this 3 times in quick succession, all while the one man had taken a step forward to yell at her. That was the last thing any of them ever did. Before there was even time to scream, the little bullet she shot them with caused a chain reaction. They turned to ash, originating from the source of the bullet wound and expanding to the rest of their bodies in a matter of seconds. As they broke down, fear and brief terror flashed across their eyes, before those 2 dried out and disappeared, becoming nothing more than a gray pile of dust on the ground, awash in the orange light from the main street outside of the alley. What did you just do? Despite his injuries, Naruto attempted to jump to his feet. He failed, only to collapse back to the ground and land on his butt. As he tried to scurry backwards and away from Kaguya, his shadow shifted and danced in the light. Wait! Still thyself. Kaguya called too late, his shadow falling away from the dumpster she stood atop of. The shifting shadow dragged her with it, sending her sprawling onto the dirty, garbage-filled street below. She hit the concrete with a loud thud, letting out a small groan of pain as she rolled over. Sorry? Naruto said. Despite the fear and confusion still racking his whole body, the slightly comical sight of the little girl falling from a dumpster was enough to calm his nerves. Although only temporarily, as he once more looked back at the piles of ash where his assailants had just been. Did you kill them? He asked, still unsure if that had truly been what had just happened. Not long before this, those 3 men had jumped him while he attempted to pass this very alley. They had struck him in the head first, dazing him and making him unable to react. The one man had been wrong earlier, when he assumed Naruto didn't fight back because he was afraid of higher retaliation from those in charge. The truth was, Naruto didn't give 2 shits about stuff like that. His opponents had just been adults that blindsided him and made it impossible to get a firm grip on what was happening until it was too late. That was all. Except now they were dust. Lower thy voice, lest others learn of what we did, Kaguya urged, holding a hand up and glancing around the surrounding area with her Byakugan to be sure. It was fortunate for them that most people wanted to ignore Naruto, as it also meant they weren't going to check on the men she just murdered. So long as no one had seen the initial act, there would never be any proof of what had happened to them. They were as good as vanished. Not that Kaguya cared about such things as human laws or their fear of death, either of which were things she was capable of understanding to begin with. All the same, it would be inconvenient for her if the master of the shadow she was bound to found himself incarcerated for charges of murder. Naruto yelled, suddenly pointing a finger at her in accusation. Don't lump me in this together with you. You did that by yourself, even if you were trying to save me. Thanks, by the way, but don't act like I had anything to do with whatever you did just now. His voice was suddenly cut off, the pain from earlier returning as he got over his shock. His eye was still swollen and several ribs were cracked. Not to mention all the bruises and other internal bleeding he no doubt suffered from at the moment. Kaguya sighed. We doth not refer to thou and us. We use it only in direct reference to Kaguya as oneself. She picked herself up, slowly ambling over to him to inspect his injuries as she explained. You mean you refer to yourself in plural? Naruto asked, before then letting out a hiss of pain as Kaguya poked at his swollen eye with her sharp nail. Kaguya was it? Kaguya-chan? Even sitting down on the ground and Naruto wasn't much shorter than her. Refer to us as thou please. Kaguya snapped, applying a slight juken touch to the wounded area around Naruto's face. It wasn't much, but the swelling was already subsiding as the wound mostly healed on its own. As Kaguya inspected his innards, she noticed even his cracked bones were beginning to mend themselves, apparently a side effect of being linked directly to her, but his healing was extraordinary. There was one other thing she noticed, a sudden swelling of chakra in the palms of Naruto's hands. This is, she whispered in awe. What is this? Naruto asked, feeling the pulsating in his hands. He let out another hiss of pain, not sure what was happening. The palms of his hands ached in searing red-hot pain, as if his skin itself was being torn open. Which might have been an accurate description of what was happening, because as he looked down at his hands, two purple eyes looked back up at him. Not just ordinary eyes, but eyes with a multitude of concentric circles. Rinnegan, Kaguya clarified. We see now, so that is what happened. She had always wondered what happened to the Rinnegan eyes that her shadow had stolen from Indra's reincarnate. The eyes had never manifested themselves in Naruto before now, despite the fact that they should have. It would appear the trauma from watching three men turn to ash in front of him had been the emotional trigger necessary to unlock them. As far as she could tell, it was an incomplete awakening. That was why they opened in his palms and not where they should have in the sockets attached to his brain. Incomplete summed up about every part of this botched resurrection, however, so it was no wonder this didn't go as it should either. If anything, this was the more expected outcome. I don't really get it, but is this gonna be okay? Naruto slowly turned his hands over, inspecting the back to make sure nothing was there. He then slowly curled in his fingers into fists, the Rinnegan eyes shutting themselves automatically as he did. When he unfurled his fingers, the eyes opened back up. Weird. He was at least handling the sudden appearance of them better than Kaguya would have hoped. Thou shalt be fine, Kaguya assured him. She began to sink into the earth, merging once more with Naruto's shadow. For now, seeking nourishment would be wise. Sustenance will help thou heal. In mere moments she was gone. Wait, where the hell did you go? Naruto leapt to his feet, this time successfully and without once more collapsing to a heap on the street. He spun around in circles, looking for Kaguya but failing to catch any sight of her. Even if he could stand, the sudden twirling motion didn't sit well with his injured head, and he nearly topped back over. An arm coming from his shadow in the wall caught him, holding him upright and preventing that. We are here exactly where we have always been. Inside thy shadow. Her voice felt like it was echoing around inside Naruto's head, not coming from any kind of outside source at all. Which was probably the most accurate way to view how she was currently communicating with him. I still don't get it, but it sounds like you're gonna be with me for a while then? Is that right, Kaguya-chan? He took a couple uneasy steps forward and the arm that had been helping him stand once more retreated back into his shadow. Yes, that would be an accurate assessment. Kaguya agreed. From inside his shadow she could see as Naruto took another look back, glancing down at the ashes that had once been people. Doth thou regret their deaths? She asked, unable to curb her own curiosity. Such fears truly were an enigma to her, and she couldn't help but wonder how Naruto could hold anything resembling affection towards those who had wished him harm. No. Naruto shook his head, surprising her by revealing the opposite instead was true. He looked down at one of the Rinnegan on the palm of his hand. It's weird, I always thought I would hate it, if someone that always cursed me died before I could make them change their mind. After you killed them though I just felt relieved. Kind of like thank goodness, now I don't have to deal with their stupid cowardly bullshit anymore. Does that make me twisted? He asked, smiling sadly as he turned to his own shadow. We do not think so, Kaguya said simply. She had no idea what concepts a young human like Naruto might view as right and wrong. However, she did know one thing. If feeling remorse for the loss of those three was what modern humans consider to be proper, she would reshape their view starting from this moment. Naruto nodded in response. Slipping his hands in his pockets, he then walked out from the alley and left those three piles of ash behind. To him, they were gone now, both in the physical sense of the word and to him emotionally. He would offer their ashes no respect, nor would anyone else know they were ever there, reduced to mere garbage to be swept up and thrown in the trash with everything in that dirty street. Just like that, the curtain peeled back as the first proper meeting between the two that would shape the entire ninja world unfolded. The cruel stage play had already begun. Yet no one had been there to witness it but the main actors themselves, Otsutsuki Kaguya and Uzumaki Naruto. Hey, Kaguya-chan. Uzumaki Naruto stopped walking, turning to look at his shadow. It was the same as it always was, but now that he looked at it a little more closely, he realized there was something just a little off. To the average observer, his shadow wasn't unusual. However, now that Naruto was aware of it, he couldn't help but notice the slight difference. His shadow, it was darker than the shadows of everyone else around him. As if two shadows stacked on top of each other. It still wasn't much of a difference, but it was noticeable enough to him now that he couldn't help but wonder how it had never come up before. Or perhaps it was because he was now different. He couldn't resist the urge to pull one of his hands from his pockets, unclenching his fist to look down at the purple eye that gazed back up at him. The Rinnegan. That was what the girl in his shadow had called it. Move it, brat! Before Naruto could ponder much more on the issue, he was violently knocked aside as one of the passers-by roughly shoved him with their full body weight. The 12-year-old blonde was sent stumbling, nearly collapsing once more onto the dirt path. He only caught himself at the last second, but it wasn't without consequence. His calves burned, head swimming in pain, and it felt like one of his ribs had cracked yet again. This was the unfortunate truth of his circumstance. Having only just been saved from the worst beating of his life, he had yet to fully recover. Yet despite the obvious injuries and unclean state of his clothes, no one offered to help him. Why would they? Everyone hated him, with few exceptions, for reasons he did not yet even comprehend. You can hear me, can't you? Kaguya-chan? Which was why he didn't worry about being seen talking to his own shadow in public. No one paid attention to him anyways, and even if they did, they would just assume the worst of him. Probably figured he had finally lost his mind or something. Yes, we can hear. What is it thou wants? Kaguya finally gave up at ignoring him, a single Byakugan eye popping out from the darkness of his shadow to look up at him. Without a proper mouth materialized, her voice merely echoed inside Naruto's head, something only for him to hear. She truthfully didn't desire to speak to him at all. For her, it had been 7 long years that she existed inside of his shadow. Yet during those 7 years she had not spoken even once. It was as she had been afraid of, but now that Naruto knew of her presence, he desired to speak with her, regardless of time or place. Naruto shrugged at her question. Nothing in particular. Just making sure you're still there, I guess. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say he was just confirming that her earlier appearance in the alley hadn't been some fever dream. We are always here. Kaguya answered, simple as that. As if it was just a common fact for someone to live in another's shadow. That's so? Naruto asked, apparently satisfied to know he wasn't alone. He turned around and once again started limping forward. His destination wasn't far, but it had taken him time to even make it this far on his bad leg. He just hoped she had been right earlier and that eating would help him recover faster. Not like there was much point in going to the hospital, where they were likely to turn him away, which was why he went to one of the only places he knew that wouldn't throw him out. Naruto-kun. The slightly older girl known as I Am called in shock as the young blonde pushed back the flaps to enter his all-time favorite ramen stall. Are you okay? She asked, walking around from the back to better get a look at the state Naruto was in. I'm fine, Nei-chan. Naruto grinned at her, attempting to downplay the severity of his injuries to little success. There was no bluffing his way through this one. Just a little fight, which I totally won by the way. You should see what they look like right now. In a way, those words weren't a complete lie. Geez, I Am huffed, bending down as she examined the still slightly puffed skin around his left eye. Well, it doesn't look too bad. She relented, although she wouldn't be able to say that if she had seen it not 10 minutes before this. Your clothes, on the other hand, in the light of the shop, the true state of Naruto's orange jacket and pants was much more apparent than they had been under the pale moonlight. Exactly as I Am noted, they were disgusting, covered in pieces of trash, dirt, blood, and possibly ash of the killed men. I guess this is pretty bad. Even Naruto couldn't deny it now that he got another look. Not seeing much choice, he unzipped the jacket and discarded it onto the floor next to a seat for the moment. Beneath the jacket was a black shirt, the symbol of Yuzushiobikyu marking the front and rear. I Am. The master of the ramen stall called for his daughter. See if we still got those shorts upstairs. They're probably a little big, but at least they'll be clean. His daughter immediately voiced her agreement, disappearing around the back of the shop as she went to get what her father asked. You don't gotta do that. Naruto tried to insist, but a shake of the head from the master silenced any protest. Well, if you say so. Thanks, Aji-san. I'll just have the usual, you know. Make it 2 of them, but a kid size for the second. As he placed his order, Naruto carefully inspected the seats. There were no other patrons at the moment, so he had free reign over any stool, but he seemed to be paying special attention to the way the light was cast over each seat while making his choice. That's rare for you to order yourself a kid's size. I Am said as she returned, not moments after she left, the aforementioned shorts in hand. As previously noted, but they were indeed quite large, extending well past his knees when he pulled them up over his orange pants. Once they were on, he slipped the pants off from underneath. Then by tightening the strings on the inside of the seam, he just barely got them secure enough to stay up without slipping down. With that, he tossed the old articles in the trash, the orange attire unsalvageable as it was. It's not for me, Naruto clarified, grabbing his chosen seat after putting on the clean shorts. My new friend is going to join me. He did not notice the surprise on either face of the staff, nor did he feel Kaguya's own disbelief from within the shadow. Thou cannot seriously expect us to come out and dine with you. Kaguya realized now that Naruto had chosen a seat at the end, where the light would cast his shadow to the stool next to him. He truly did intend for her to come out and eat and had apparently planned it from the beginning. You made a friend? I Am asked, sounding at the same time doubtful yet conflictingly hopeful. Kaguya had observed Naruto for a long time now, and these two were perhaps the only exception to the rule in how Naruto was treated. While it was true there were those that didn't hold him in outright disdain, even the peers in Naruto's place of education were at best neutral towards him. So to hear he had finally made a friend, it was almost certainly a first. Although Kaguya wouldn't call herself a friend per se. Yep. Naruto nodded gleefully, his cracked lips splitting in a huge grin. Despite how painful it must have been for him to smile with his wounds, he didn't seem to mind. Here's the thing though, she's like super shy. Naruto emphasized the last couple words for effect. So it would really save me if you two would just kinda turn around and prepare the ramen while I wave her in, you know? They did as asked, although the ramen master's daughter still didn't appear totally convinced. As they went about their work, Naruto winked exaggeratedly down at his shadow, patting on the stool next to him as if to tell her exactly where to come out. Kaguya considered just ignoring him. She really did. It wouldn't have been hard for her to do it either. She had technically been doing it for 7 years already, after all. So this didn't have to be any different than all those times. Yet in the end she couldn't do that. She had already made her choice. From the moment she had decided to emerge from the shadow for the first time, she had committed herself to getting more involved with his life from then on. Of course, she didn't expect that to develop in such a way as this, least of all not so quickly. That just went to show how much she had underestimated Uzumaki Naruto, and the kind of person he was. She would admit, however, she didn't hate this part of him. Kaguya emerged from his shadow, already sitting down on the tall stool. At her current height, she doubted her ability to have been able to climb up here otherwise without the power of levitation which she was currently incapable of. Naruto smiled, legs swinging back and forth in unrestrained joy, no doubt taking some small pride in his victory at coaxing her out. This was also the first time he got to look at her under proper light, inspecting her from top to bottom as if studying an alien species. Which would have been an accurate description of her. Oh my! Gave out an exclamation of surprise, turning around to see Kaguya there. Although Kaguya would admit she wasn't sure which was more shocking, the way she entered without making any sound or her seemingly alien-like appearance. Father, look! Naruto actually brought in a friend. Then again, maybe it was either of those things. How rude! I told you, didn't I? Naruto crossed his arms and huffed, but it was clear there wasn't any actual fire to his pout. It was all just for show. Yeah? I knew this too, waving him off and instead focusing solely on their newest customer. So what's your name, little girl? She asked, just condescendingly enough that Kaguya considered turning her to ash next. It was lucky for her that Kaguya had a mountain of reasons not to do so right at this very moment. Instead, Kaguya reached over, tugging on Naruto's sleeve for his attention. Naruto asked, looking back and forth between them. For a second, Kaguya thought he wasn't going to catch on before the realization lit up in his eyes. Oh yeah. So this is Kaguya-chan. There was a slight pause. Like I said, she's a little shy. So don't worry if she doesn't speak much. Or at all. Kaguya-chan, huh? Intertwined her fingers over her heart. What a wonderful name. I don't know how you and Naruto became friends, but please take good care of him, okay? She said, as if entrusting Kaguya with her actual little brother. Order up. Not much more could be said as the master placed 2 steaming bowls of ramen in front of them. And I'll tell you what, in honor of this special occasion of Naruto bringing in his first friend, it's on us tonight. Naruto let out a cheer at the announcement before going to clap his hands together in thanks for the food. He paused just shy, suddenly remembering the Rinnegan eyes on his palms. Still not used to the eyes and what he could do exactly without hurting them, he was noticeably conscious about the way he put his hands together, and then the way he grabbed the chopsticks. As if he was afraid any wrong move might cause him to poke them out. Noticed his weird movements, but said nothing of it as she no doubt just assumed it was another wound he was attempting to hide. The ramen master, however, appeared to realize more than he let on. At the very least, he had noticed the true severity of Naruto's injuries, unlike his daughter. Even still, he did not ask questions, nor did he pry. He simply did what was within his power, offering Naruto warm food and a temporary shelter. Nothing more, but considering his station it was enough. In respect of that, Kaguya decided she would do him the royal honor of sampling the small offering he had prepared for her. What kind of god would she be if she didn't respond to the people's tribute every once in a while? After all, Kaguya took her chopsticks, mimicking the standard custom she had just witnessed Naruto perform before she too began to study her food. It was truly different from her time, but she would say she did not dislike the smell of it. Slowly, and ever so carefully, she lifted the steaming noodles from the broth. After blowing on the noodles to cool them a little, she finally inhaled her first bite. She savored the texture, enjoying the taste that was unlike anything she had experienced before. The heat spread from her mouth and then warmed her whole body. Truly, humankind was a disgusting and foul race, but she would admit it. They knew how to prepare food suitable for even the palate of a god. Good? Naruto asked, grinning cockily at her. He had paused his own consumption, something she knew he rarely did if it wasn't already all devoured, all just so he could rub it in her face how delicious the ramen was. As if he had been telling her that all along. Humph. Kaguya turned her nose up at him, but nevertheless she went in for a second helping only moments later, scooting her bowl to the side so she wouldn't have to look at him while she ate. Although she could do nothing about the slight blush that was made only more apparent on her pale skin. Adorable! Could contain it no longer, practically dancing around the entire back of the kitchen. It looked like at any moment she might fly over the top of the counter to tackle Kaguya in a hug. Where did you find such a cute little girl, Naruto? Again, Kaguya considered turning her to ash. And again, was saved. This time because Kaguya would acknowledge that even under a new world order, she would need to be kept around in order to continue serving more of this ramen. Things settled down after that, all conversation ceasing so the two customers could enjoy their meals while they were hot. For Kaguya's first meal in over 1,000 years, she would say it had been pretty good, all things considered. If this was what the common folk normally ate, she could only imagine what those at the top must be allowed to consume. Thanks for the food. Naruto finished first, despite having a far larger bowl than Kaguya. She wasn't far behind, eating perhaps the fastest she ever had, even when compared to how she ate as an adult. As Kaguya had suspected, but the rate of Naruto's recovery had increased dramatically after he started eating. She suspected his body naturally burned the calories, converting them into the power necessary for his natural healing attribute. Come again soon, alright. Reached over and rubbed Naruto's head affectionately. That means you too, Kaguya-chan. She then turned, winking at the petite woman. Kaguya ignored her, jumping down from the stool, falling the rest of the way to the floor to land dexterously on her feet. Naruto called his goodbyes over his shoulder, slumping down next to her, keeping extra caution of where his shadow was at all times so he didn't accidentally knock her over again. Kaguya reached up with one of her tiny hands, wrapping her fingers around Naruto's left pinky and ring finger. The two of them pretended not to hear Iam's swooning yell as they walked out from the shop together. Although once they were back out on the main street, it was hard for Kaguya to ignore the curious gaze Naruto had as he looked down at her. Do not misunderstand, she whispered. It would merely be inconvenient for us to walk otherwise. Her tiny legs did not exactly carry her anywhere quickly on their own, and holding on to Naruto helped her make sure they kept pace with one another so she didn't get pulled around needlessly by his shadow. Okay, Naruto responded simply. He didn't make fun of her, nor did it seem like he had any intention to. Instead, he smiled warmly. It was perhaps one of the most genuine gestures of warmth she had ever seen him display, as they did not come easily to someone who was only ever given coldness their whole lives, with the only exception being the ramen behind them. He then nodded at the opposite end of the street. Kaguya followed his gaze, noticing a shop marked with two crossed kunai above the door. He explained after she found it, they sell ninja gear and equipment. I was thinking of getting some gloves, to cover up these. He lifted his free hand, pointing the Rinnegan right at her. Kaguya nodded. This is wise. She agreed. What she didn't think was wise, however, was her walking around in public with him. If it was just to the weapons shop, she would allow it though. When was the last time she stretched her legs? Not that her muscles experienced things such as atrophy like a human might have, so the two of them made their way across the street as quickly as possible. It wasn't easy, having to constantly dodge back and forth around the pedestrians walking past either way. That was without considering that several belligerents sought to run into Naruto purposefully upon noticing it was him, most of them diverting at only the last second when they realized he wasn't alone. In the end they made it without incident, and with the sound of a small bell the door to the weapon shop swung open. Welko, the older clerk, began to call out, stopping when he saw who it was. He eyed Naruto wearily, as if he was a thief here to rob him of everything he had and not a paying customer, as intended. His gaze fell on her next, and she returned his glare right back. Even in child form, not many could stand the heated stare of a Byakugan, and this man was no exception, quickly averting his eyes and returning to read some newspaper he had placed on the counter. Aside from him, there was no one else in the shop. They were the only customers right now, although Kaguya suspected it would remain that way if anyone had seen Naruto enter. Very few would willingly enter the same space as he was in, which meant his very presence was bad for business. This meant Naruto got thrown out of most shops immediately, so even being allowed in was a step up for him, although it was unlikely his tolerance would be accepted for long. The man was already making troubled grunts as the two lingered by the entrance. Not that Naruto seemed to care, humming to himself as if to show he didn't even notice, only slowly meandering in as he took in all the sights. Kaguya couldn't help but smirk. Whether it was intentional and Naruto was just being vindictive or not, she couldn't help but enjoy the little display he was putting on. Regardless, she would feel more relaxed if she could take care of what they came here for. Naruto didn't realize it, but he was playing a dangerous game by not concealing her or the Rinnegan. This was her fault, as she had not yet stressed the importance of such things to him yet. No doubt there was a long conversation awaiting them tonight, when they were away from any prying eyes. Before making his way to the gloves, Naruto stopped in front of a glass case filled with a myriad of swords. So cool, Naruto admired them, looking in particular at a giant blade larger than he was tall. Such foolishness, Kaguya sneered, snapping him from his delusions. The minerals used to smelt that sword are of the lowest quality. Thy money would be much better spent on another blade. Kaguya had no kind of concept of modern money, but she imagined the long string of zeros at the end of the price tag did not signify affordability. Yeah, then what do you recommend? Naruto snapped back at her, voice challenging her to pick a better weapon. She saw no point in entertaining such a pointless game, as Naruto most certainly did not possess the funds to purchase even the cheapest of these swords. Still, she would not have the value of her eye questioned, and so scanned over the assortment in the display case before her. Finally, she found it. This one, she said, pointing at a tanto, a short sword no bigger than Naruto's forearm, made of steel so pure it almost looked white. The hilt guard was the red spiral pattern of Yuzushi Ogakure, and most impressive was the handle of the blade itself. The black leather concealed beneath it a complex array of seals designed to more easily channel chakra directly into the blade, and Naruto wrinkled his nose in dissatisfaction. Couldn't you have picked something more romantic? I would just get made fun of for swinging one of these around. It's barely bigger than a kunai. His hyperbole was not lost on Kaguya. The blade was easily twice the length of one of the daggers Naruto was now referring to. Of course, it was all about relativity, and anything would seem short when compared to the impractical monstrosity Naruto wanted. If you're just gonna badmouth my swords, get lost you damn brats. The old clerk must have heard them, shouting over the top of his newspaper without even looking in their direction. He had not even seen which sword Kaguya was pointing to. As she realized this, a sinister idea began to form in the back of her mind. She had not attempted something like it before, but she saw no reason why it shouldn't work. Especially if it was this sword. Alright already, geez. Naruto didn't even notice the evil grin that spread across Kaguya's face. Instead, he began to pull her along, his shadow falling over the sword they had just been looking at as they passed it by. It was at that moment Kaguya tested her theory, unbeknownst to anyone else. The two of them made it over to the gloves, which were located in the back of the store and out of sight from the clerk and his desk. 2,000 ryo for some gloves, so damn pricey. Naruto groaned despondently as he looked across the selection. We do not understand. Kaguya tilted her head. Unlike with swords, she did not see any measurable difference between one pair of gloves and the next. Are such things not considered a standard commodity? Should they not be provided for their warriors? When she had ruled, her military would not have to pay for things like this themselves. An army would not have functioned back then if they had been required to. Not exactly sure what you're talking about, but Naruto rubbed the back of his head, still not entirely grasping the complexity of Kaguya's language. They don't just give these things away. And I don't make much of an allowance. Not until I graduate from the academy in about a month, at least. Humanity has grown complex since we've been sealed, it would appear. Kaguya rubbed her chin, still trying to clear her head of all her old assumptions. She had mistakenly believed that humanity was incapable of evolution, but it would seem they had developed all kinds of systems she had seen no need to understand until now. Of course, once she ruled again she could undo many of them. However, until then she was going to need to learn to play their silly games. What in the fuck? There was a sudden loud commotion that interrupted their conversation, the store clerk storming over towards them with loud footfalls. Naruto's entire body bristled as if a wild animal, pupils dilating as the old man rounded the corner and stalked up to them. Where is it, you damn thief? He shouted, pointing a finger accusingly at the young blonde. I don't know what you're talking about. Naruto deadpanned, and it was the truth. Of course, just because it was the truth didn't mean he was going to be given the benefit of the doubt. Innocence meant nothing when the people had already decided you were guilty of a different crime. The sword. You stole the sword. A vein so large it looked like it might burst popped up atop the old man's head, his face a sweltering shade of red that was almost comical. In contrast to this, Naruto just looked at him dumbfounded, pulling at his pockets to show they were empty aside from his frog-shaped wallet. I don't have anything, do you, Kaguya-chan? Naruto asked, looking down at the shorter girl. She smiled, silently enjoying the exchange, as she lifted her sleeves to reveal nothing. Never mind the fact that she was so short it would ordinarily be impossible for her to hide anything, let alone a sword of any kind. You damn brat, I know it was you. The clerk appeared to have enough, hand reaching forward to grab Naruto by the mop of blonde hair on his head. He had no idea how close to death he just was. The smile on Kaguya's face disappeared immediately. Her arm was still lowered, but she had already curved her hand into the shape of a finger gun, index finger extended and thumb pointing up. Just as a small gray bone started to poke past her flesh, was the man saved from himself. That's far enough. The hand of a fourth person reached out from between them, grabbing the store owner by the wrist. One moment there had been no one there, the next he was. He was a tall man with gravity-defying white hair. Aside from that, there wasn't much more information to be said about this new presence. He wore standard Konohagakure no Sato ninja attire, and his face was almost impossible to see, the lower half covered with a mask and his left eye hidden by a slanted hitate. Despite his seemingly harmless appearance, however, he put Kaguya immediately on edge. She hadn't even sensed him come in the store, let alone see him move just now when he appeared before them. The man had no presence, as if just a scarecrow rather than a human. No, to say he had no presence wasn't entirely correct. There was a pressure there, one concealed in his hidden left eye. Kaguya had no idea what it was, but she didn't like it. Being seen at all by one of Konohagakure's military was bad for her. Even more so by one with some kind of perceptive eye. It was too late for such regrets now. So the only thing she could do was keep her jutsu ready. If she decided he posed a threat, she would just eliminate the both of them. No matter how skilled this man may be, no one could survive being hit by her jutsu. A ninja? The clerk couldn't decide between being shocked by the sudden appearance, remaining angry as before, or being relieved at the presence of an authority figure, so his words came out as some odd combination of all three. However, it quickly became apparent that he thought of this as beneficial to himself. Just in time he growled, shaking his hand free to once again thrust an accusatory finger at Naruto. "This brat stole one of my swords." The masked man blinked slowly, lazily, even as he stared at the red-faced store clerk with something akin to pure nihilism. He then slowly turned his head, looking down at Naruto, who simply folded his arms in defiance and glared back, as if daring him to do something. Finally, after several agonizing moments, did the man speak again. "Well, Naruto?" He called the blonde by name, along with some sense of familiarity even. "Is that true?" he asked. "I already said it isn't." Naruto stomped his foot, growing tired of going through this song and dance every time. Just because something bad happened when he was around didn't make him the problem. With that, the masked man shrugged. "Well, seeing as how you don't seem to be holding any swords, I figured that had to be the case." He reasoned logically. "You're going to take his side." Of course, this sense of logic didn't extend to the shop owner, spit flying from his mouth as he yelled, Now. Let's calm down. I'm not taking any sides here," the masked man said, holding up his hands to protect himself from the suddenly flying spittle. "I'm just saying, isn't it possible you misplaced it?" The very suggestion that the shop owner himself could somehow be the one at fault was the final straw for the old man. "I want all three of you out of here," he bellowed at the top of his lungs, loud enough to rattle the windows. For the masked man and Kaguya, that was only all too agreeable. However, Naruto still hadn't accomplished what he had come here to do in the first place. "At least sell me these gloves first." Naruto ripped the first pair he could off the wall, holding them up. "It's the least you can do after accusing me of shit I didn't even do. 4,000 ryo, hand it over right here in exact change." The man didn't even miss a beat, holding out the palm of his hand as if expecting Naruto to dump the contents of his wallet right there. Kaguya was almost surprised that he would accept any kind of transaction at all. "Almost. That's double the price, you cheapskate." Naruto pointed at the price tag, indicating that they were marked at only 2,000. "There's 2 gloves, aren't there?" the man asked, as if Naruto was the stupid one for not understanding such a simple concept. Kaguya was ashamed to admit, but the logic didn't seem that insane to her. In any other situation, she might have believed that was the natural conclusion anyone would draw. This only reinforced to herself how dangerously naive she had become of the present times. "I think that's enough here. Come on, Naruto." It wasn't until the masked man also seemed disgusted by the store owner's logic that Kaguya even realized the truth. A hand rested on Naruto's shoulder and started to guide him out, so Kaguya quickly took Naruto's fingers in her tiny hand again so as not to be separated from him. As all three of them exited quietly, Naruto looked up at the stranger, eyes asking for him why this newcomer had helped him just now, when anyone else would have just let it go, or worse, have sided against him. His voice, however, asked a different question. "Who are you?" "Well, you can just call me Kakashi," the man said, seemingly having deliberated about even giving him that much information. It was hard to tell if that was even his real name, and it most definitely didn't explain his relationship to Naruto. Anyways, here, Kakashi, as he called himself, wasn't done helping them yet. He pulled off his gloves, standard shinobi issue going by their appearance, but they were certainly more expensive than the ones Naruto had been looking to buy just now. Naruto looked down at the gloves suspiciously as they were thrust towards him, nose wrinkling as if he smelled something foul. "You're just going to give them to me?" he asked. His suspicion wasn't unwarranted. Not only was this man helping him, but now offering his gloves free of charge. The man looked up at the moonlit sky as he considered how best to answer. "Think of it as an apology," he finally said, although what he was apologizing for was a mystery. It had been him that helped them out, even though he had no reason for the kindness that they knew of. "Well, if you say so." Naruto hesitantly reached forward, taking the gloves without any kind of resistance. He had half expected the man to snatch them away just before he could and yell out it had been a prank. Even as Naruto slipped them on, he still didn't rule out the possibility the man would turn on them, accuse Naruto of stealing the gloves like he had just been accused of stealing the sword. Instead, the man bent down as he turned his attention now to Kaguya. "And what about you, Oju-chan? How do you know Naruto?" He did not ask her for her name, but she would not have given it to him anyways. However, asking her relationship to Naruto was in a way a good opportunity for her. She had been waiting to make the status of their relationship clear until now. "He is our Uruji," she proclaimed clearly and proudly, placing her hands on her hips as she did so. Despite claiming him as her lord and master just now, it was actually more accurate to say he was the master of the shadow she inhabited. So he was not her own master by direct connection, but it was otherwise the simplest way to term their relationship to one another. There was a pregnant pause, neither Naruto nor Kakashi knowing how to react right away. What Kaguya did not expect, however, was the man to start chuckling, one eye closing in a smile as he reached forward and rubbed her head. "Is that so? Good for him," he said, before then standing back to his full height and nodding once more at them. "Be seeing you around, maybe? Try to stay out of trouble until then if you can." With that, he turned around and started to walk away. "Ah, thanks." Naruto called after him before it was too late, not even sure his voice reached the fading back of the mysterious man. An over-the-shoulder wave signaled it had, and a moment later he disappeared into the crowd. So what now? Naruto asked, inspecting the new gloves that covered his hands. With his Rinnegan finally hidden, they had one less thing to worry about. We shall go out into the forest, Kaguya said, pulling at Naruto's hand to get him to move. Thou requires some instruction, and we imagine thou also have questions. For now, she just wanted to get him away from the crowds. There were too many potential problems out in public. Finally some answers. Naruto nodded, allowing himself to be guided along by Kaguya the first couple steps before taking the lead. It would be up to him to take them to a remote spot where they couldn't be bothered. He knew of a couple places, naturally. Someone as hated as he was needed a place to escape to once in a while. After that blow up in the shop too, he felt the need to get away too. What was that even all about anyways? Did someone actually steal a sword? He wondered aloud, not expecting an actual answer to that particular question. We did not steal, Kaguya insisted, surprising him when she lifted her sleeve once again. From the darkness inside the tip of the hilt came out. Everything in this world originally belonged to us. So this sword is our right, she explained simply, completely missing his look of shock. How? When? Naruto wanted to be angry at her. That whole mess could have been avoided if she had done nothing and just left the sword alone. When he thought about that store clerk though, and how he tried to charge him double for the gloves, he couldn't bring himself to think that Kaguya had done anything wrong. In fact, they deserved that sword, for all the things he had been cheated out of in his life. It was about damn time he finally took something back. We told thou, this is a fine blade, Kaguya stated as if that answered his question. It channels one's chakra affinity and ours is in itself. Pulling it into thy shadow was hardly any effort. It would be more accurate to say the blade fell in of its own accord. She finished her explanation, but Naruto still didn't really understand. He decided to leave it for now, as he could always ask her later to explain it with everything else. I think Naruto started to say, squeezing Kaguya's hand a little more tightly as they walked. I'm really glad that you finally came out of my shadow. He had always felt like there was something there, but had also always assumed it was his imagination. Just some dark fantasy. Then when she had finally come out, he had been terrified. Mortified as she murdered 3 people in front of him. Not because she had murdered them, but because of how effortlessly she had done it. It was that same effortlessness with which she took something that didn't belong to her, yet was able to claim with confidence afterwards that it had always been hers. To have such confidence to go against everything he thought was normal up until now, it invigorated him. Filled him with the will to also want to change and somehow become like that. She may have called him her master, but he now felt it should be the other way around. These kinds of sentiments were a first for Kaguya, but she could not say she disliked it. To have someone voice happiness at the thought of being with her wasn't a bad feeling at all. Yes, we are somewhat happy too, Kaguya responded by squeezing Naruto's hand back, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers. Human warmth, which she hadn't felt in over 1,000 years. It was a full moon tonight. Kaguya hated the moon, how could she not? For her, it had been nothing more than a millennium-long prison. Yet even she could not deny its beauty. And never had she seen it as clearly as she did tonight. That was because before now she only had the opportunity to view it from within Naruto's shadow. Even as he slept, rolling over in his bed, she did not leave his shadow for even a moment. Just merely gazing up at the moon those nights from within it. As if looking at her former prison from within her new one. Naruto had realized this earlier, but his shadow was a little special. Not just because she resided in it, but because her will had merged its shadow with his. This meant even in the darkest of nights, he would still have a shadow. Let alone a night like tonight with a full moon. Now she walked beside Naruto, hand in hand, as they slowly made their way deeper and deeper into one of the numerous forests from which Konohagakure had received its name. The light of the moon was a blessing, casting a wider shadow so she could move somewhat more freely. Not that she took advantage of this, preferring to cling as closely to Naruto as physically possible for the moment. The two of them came into a wide clearing with several large boulders scattered about. It would appear it was a proper training ground of some sorts, the rocks covered in numerous scars no doubt caused from ninja blades. Of course, no one was here at this time of night, making it perfect for them now. This will do. Kaguya nodded in respect to Naruto. He had been the one leading them here, after all, so it had been his good sense to choose this place. She had been aware that he knew his way around the forests, but to be this informed to even know such an excellent area, she had underestimated him yet again. Really? That's a relief. Naruto chuckled happily, just glad to have been able to pick a place to her liking. He didn't really know her much yet, but she seemed like the hard-to-please type of person. He also had no idea how right about that he was. Now wasn't the time to get to know her, however, now was finally the time for him to get some answers. He let go of Kaguya's hand to pull off the gloves that the mysterious Kakashi person had given to him earlier, once again exposing the purple eyes full of concentric circles on the palms of either hand. First of all, you know what these are? He asked, pointing the eyes in her direction. Rinnegan, Kaguya said again, taking several steps away from him. His shadow stretched only 3 short meters, which was all the distance she could get from him now. Yes, we know what they are. She didn't bother looking at the eyes, instead looking back up at the moon. It had been the power of those eyes that sealed her there in the first place, after all. So what are they then? Naruto encouraged her to continue, eager to get to the bottom of these sudden new eyes. For him, who knew nothing of the 3 great dojutsu, or any of the forgotten history, Kaguya was at a loss for how to properly explain. For starters, it was unlikely Naruto had ever even heard the title of her son, Rikudo Sennin, or his numerous accomplishments. Even the religion he had founded, Nishu, had been perverted and twisted into ninjutsu. It was no longer a power to connect others as he intended, but now just a power to strengthen oneself. Never mind her son's teachings, however, it was the power of his eyes that were important to this matter. He was called Rikudo Sennin in the legends because his Rinnegan had granted him access to 6 unique abilities, paths as he referred to them as. However, Kaguya was unable to sense the connection to these numerous paths in the eyes that awakened in Naruto. That was perhaps inevitable. Like her resurrection, the Rinnegan awakening had been the result of an imperfect procedure. As the Rinnegan currently were, Kaguya was reminded more of a being known as Momoshiki, from her own clan, rather than her son. Of course, explaining her true nature would be even more difficult and unbelievable a story, but trying to start from the Rikudo Sennin would possibly give Naruto a false impression. Make him think he was capable of more than he ever would be. This wasn't to say Naruto didn't already hold incredible power in those hands. So long as he learned to harness their power, he would gain incredible strength unlike anything he thought imaginable. He would be more perfect than he imagined himself in his dreams. In fact, depending on the path he had access to, he might even be capable of miracles above her son. A jack of all trades is a master of none. Despite the leagues of devoted followers who would call him their master, and for all his miraculous achievements, Rikudo Sennin had never reached the end of any one path. Of course he hadn't. It would be impossible with the way he had continued with his life, attempting to simultaneously walk 6 individual paths all at once. For Naruto, reaching the end of one path might be possible. So long as he devoted himself to it, and followed Kaguya's guidance, that is. Of course, the first step was understanding that he stood at the start of the path at all. Something he would never figure out if Kaguya didn't start explaining to him the nature of things. All thou need to know about the Rinnegan is one thing. Kaguya decided that instead of explaining the history of the eyes, she would at least tell him the concept upon which they operated under. Under the right circumstances they will awaken in a host, and through coincidence those circumstances gathered within now, and the Rinnegan appeared. Only it hadn't been entirely a coincidence. Perhaps a reincarnation of Ajura being born the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was, but everything after was a deliberate act. Yeah, I don't really get all the complicated stuff, you know. Point is, I get some kind of cool power from this, right? Naruto asked, turning the eyes up to look at them for himself. If he was being honest, having eyes in his hands felt kind of disgusting, but if he got to do cool stuff with them, that was good enough for him. Kaguya sighed, not knowing why she had just bothered. Of course, she realized now. Naruto didn't care about the history or where the eyes came from. The only thing he wanted to know was what kind of new power he had. In a way, that made things easier for her, but she did wish he would take knowledge a little more seriously. Yes, that much is certainly not mistaken, Kaguya said. She decided for now to humor him, as she would not deny that she was also curious what power he would manifest. Once thou make those eyes thy own, that is. The truth was exactly as she said, Naruto's Rinnegan weren't truly his own just yet. He had awakened the eyes, yes, but they were in a way still dormant. That much was obvious because he had yet to be able to see out of them. In addition to this, she could only sense Indra's chakra coming from the Rinnegan. What the heck does that mean? Naruto tilted his head. How can they not be mine? They're in my hands. And if they're not mine, how do I use them? It was too many questions all at once for Kaguya to answer, so she decided to not even bother. Instead, she would just solve the core issue. Rather, she would have him do it for himself. Hold out thy hands like this. Kaguya spread her arms wide, palms facing upwards, in a way that looked as if she was praying to the heavens. Naruto did as she instructed, mimicking her movements. This shall perhaps be more easy if thou close thy eyes. Naruto nodded, doing as told and slowly closing off his blue eyes. Kaguya and the world around him disappeared as he was thrust into darkness. Kaguya called out further instructions a moment later, reassuring him that he wasn't alone, the same as preparing any jutsu. Weave chakra into thy hands. That should be enough to complete thy connection to the Rinnegan. He had been expecting a much more complex ritual of some sorts, but it seemed to be as easy as that. Not that he was going to complain. He had never been good at the complicated stuff, or creating clones, but even he could unleash his chakra when he had to. Chakra flared up from deep within his stomach, swirling around and then spreading to the rest of his body. He could feel the power surging down his legs and into his arms. It raced into his palms and there was a sudden pulse of energy. Unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was like ripples on the water, only it was his skin experiencing this instead. Then he could see. The full moon was shining down at him, and he was looking right up at it. That didn't make sense though his neck was still slightly inclined from having to look down at the much shorter Kaguya. Yet somehow he was looking up at the moon right now anyways. Turn thy palms towards us, Kaguya instructed. Naruto didn't really get it but did as was told. As he moved his hands, the image he was seeing changed. Until as he started to reach forward and Kaguya came into view. This is Naruto gasped. Am I seeing with my hands? The knowing smirk Kaguya gave was all the answer he needed. Even then Naruto couldn't believe it, letting out an ecstatic laugh as he turned his hands in opposite directions. His very vision split, as if looking at two separate images simultaneously. While the sudden sensory upload was so unlike anything he had ever experienced before that there was a sudden spike of pain in his head and a wave of vertigo. He grit his teeth, Rinnegan eyes flinching shut as he fell to his knees. Do no fret, Kaguya said, her voice unconcerned, as she took a couple steps towards him. While on his knees, the two were near the same height, so it was easier for her to reach forward, taking his cheeks in her hands and stroking his face comfortingly. Thou shalt adapt to thy new sight quickly. The first time is always the most difficult. His blue eyes shot open, surprised by her sudden proximity. Although he could say he didn't mind the touch, enjoying the sensation of someone holding him in any way a foreign, but not unwelcome concept. That was wild. Naruto grinned through the piercing headache. So these eyes are mine now, right? Kaguya indicated for him to look down. See for thyself, she said. What he saw when he did was perhaps the last thing he had expected. His Rinnegan eyes were now a vibrant yellow that seemed to cast their own light, like two miniature suns. No longer were they the dull lifeless purple that they had originally awoken as. He didn't dislike the old color, but this new one certainly felt more like himself. Be assured, they are thy Rinnegan. Unique to thou now. Kaguya took a step back as she turned to face one of the numerous boulders. Aim thy dominant hand at that boulder. It is time to confirm thy path. Finally, Naruto stumbled back to his feet, holding his right arm out in front of himself, palm open. He gripped his forearm with his left hand and again began to channel chakra. As before, vision from the right eye flooded in and this time formed an image on top of what his blue eyes were also viewing. It was still an unusual and kind of a nauseating sensation, but it didn't cause a sense of imbalance or pain like before. What now? He wondered aloud, as just pointing the eye somewhere didn't seem to be doing anything. The same as when thou perform any jutsu, Kaguya said. This time, instead of simply weaving chakra in preparation for the jutsu, unleash the chakra and the jutsu should activate automatically. Like this? Naruto had no idea what he was expecting, but he did as instructed and pumped chakra once more into his right palm before discharging it all at once. At first, it seemed like nothing was going to happen, but then they both felt the change. As if gravity was suddenly pressing in on them from the side. The boulder Naruto was pointing his palm at was ripped from the ground, being dragged forward by some invisible force, and came flying at them with the speed of a thrown kunai. Holy shit! Naruto yelled in a panic, glancing at Kaguya as if to ask what to do. Only she was no longer there. Kaguya had already dropped into his shadow, disappearing completely in order to avoid the incoming rock. Naruto didn't have such luxury and had to dive to the side, tucking into a roll to just barely dodge the boulder 3 times his side as it flew past. It carried on unhindered into the forest until it hit a tree, shattering bark and gouging a path through the earth as it continued its destructive path. Several trees were sent toppling to the forest floor, making a ruckus so loud that birds and other wildlife were sent fleeing in all directions, their screams and animistic cries only further adding to the discord. This cacophony of noise and chaos went on for several more agonizing seconds, Naruto having tucked himself into the ground face first, hands covering his head and but in the air as he just waited for it all to end, hoping none of the trees fell on him. Finally, silence once again reigned. Aside from the distant cry of upset birds now circling the skies, Naruto was only able to hear his own ragged breathing. He slowly lowered his hands, lifting his head to turn around and view the destruction he had just caused. At least half a dozen trees were down, the boulder having carved a clear path through anything that had been in its way, which had almost also included him. That was awesome. Naruto couldn't even shout, just uttering his exclamation breathlessly. He looked down once again at his Rinnegan eye, not able to comprehend that it had been his own power just now that had caused what just happened. That was the Bansho Tenin, Kaguya corrected, reappearing from his shadow with her arms folded and a satisfied smirk. As we already suspected, but thou walk the path of heaven itself, Tendo. Her words were haughty and yet full of pride. Naruto had no idea what she was talking about, but it would appear she too had been pleased by his power just now. It was kind of dangerous though. Naruto chuckled awkwardly, stumbling to his feet as he better inspected the damage just caused. I'm not gonna have to dodge my own attack every time, right? Thou shalt learn control, Kaguya assured him, glancing over to his left hand now. We already have a general idea of thy power, but for posterity, we should assess the capabilities of thy non-dominant hand. Right-o. Naruto wasn't about to complain, turning to a different boulder, and this time raising his left hand to point at it. Just to be safe, he tensed his leg muscles, ready to dive out of the way at a moment's notice. Channeling chakra into his palm again, he unleashed another attack. This time, instead of gravity running towards them, it was as if it was being pushed away. The boulder was blasted backwards with enough force to send it airborne. It didn't make it far before smashing into another rock of equal size, the two hunks of stone shattering apart upon collision and sending shrapnel whizzing past in every direction. Naruto was at a loss for words, arms dropping down to his sides as he stared mouth agape at the sheer destruction he was capable of with just a single point and small discharge of chakra. This morning when he woke up, he couldn't have fathomed having this kind of power for himself. Yet now it was his reality. Shinra Tensei. Kaguya stated the name of the ability demonstrated just now. In thy right is the power of attraction, and in thy left is repulsive force. Truly the dominion of heaven itself. As she talked, Naruto glanced down at her. She seemed to be in a good mood, throwing back her long white hair with one hand as she went to place both fists on her hips. You suspected this? Naruto asked, recalling what she said just after he used the first technique he didn't quite remember the name of. Why would you think I would develop this power in particular? He knew nothing about paths or how many of them there might be, but she hadn't seemed surprised that out of all of them he would get this one, and had even been ready when the boulder initially came flying in their direction. We just said it, but Tendo is power over attracting and repelling forces. There was a slight pause, but when it was apparent Naruto still didn't understand, she elaborated further. In more simple terms, opposites. The same principle in which Inyo governs over. Inyo? Naruto asked, having a vague idea like he had heard the word before but being unable to place it. Separately, thou might know it as yin and yang. Inyo is the culmination of those two sides into one whole. Kaguya explained. As for why we suspected it, she held up her arm and from the darkness of her sleeve the tanto she had earlier stolen appeared. She grabbed it by the hilt and pulled the blade free. For one such as thou, showing might be easier than just hearing an explanation. Kaguya channeled chakra into the sword and then held it over her head. We said it earlier, but this is a fine blade. Able to channel one's chakra and incorporate it into their attack. Observe. As she swung it down, the blade made a black streak through the air, the tip of the blade unleashing her chakra in a dark, shadowy slash. We have a yin-type chakra affinity, as thou can see. At her full power, she would have actually had both Inyo and all the other primary chakra elements as part of her nature. Yet her imperfect resurrection had left her with only yin. Her shadow hadn't realized it, but it had unintentionally only pulled the yin chakra of the other 8 biju when extracting a sliver of their essence. It was, however, this unintentional mistake that ended up in a serendipitous merger. She tossed the blade to Naruto, who only barely managed to catch it by the hilt. Channel thy chakra into the blade and swing it as we did. She didn't wait for him to ask any questions, and Naruto, for his part, quietly did as he was told. When he swung the blade down, in contrast to the black, shadowy chakra of Kaguya's strike, the blade now emitted a force of pure white. Thy chakra affinity is yang. At least, it became as such when thou became our Jinchuriki host. She had no doubt that Naruto had probably been born with a different type of affinity, more than likely one of the 5 elemental natures most humans possessed. However, that had changed when her shadow had merged all of the things it had gathered with his chakra. Indra's eyes, slices of yin chakra from 8 biju, and the nature of a shadow itself being darkness had almost created an imbalance of dark energy inside Naruto. Had that imbalance remained as it was unlikely he would have survived the merger, and everything would have been for naught. This was why she described it as a stroke of serendipity. The Yandame Hokage had sealed only the yang half of Kyuubi's chakra in Naruto, and Azura's chakra also consisted primarily of yang energy itself. These things served as a counterweight, balancing the scales and allowing her incomplete resurrection to work at all. In the process they both lost their original affinity, but emerged with a new one, yang for Naruto and yin for Kaguya. Together they were the perfect representation of Inyo. Jinchuriki? Naruto asked now. Unlike with Inyo, where he had at least a vague idea of its concept, he was confident he had never heard that word before now. Yet he didn't like the sound of it, getting the sense the word was somehow dirty, and even saying it was slanderous. That is right, Kaguya realized. Thou do not know. Their time together so far may have been brief, but Naruto had not once asked about Kaguya's origins, despite having numerous opportunities to. She already knew why. To Naruto, it didn't matter where she came from. He was just happy to have someone to talk to. Someone that would be by his side, that was forced into being by his side. Even if Kaguya had come out to tell him she hated him, Naruto would have tried to befriend her. Because he would have known she could not go anywhere. They were stuck together, and to Naruto, that made her the closest connection he ever had. What don't I know? Naruto pressed, concern and fear filling his voice and causing it to crack. While he may have been content not knowing Kaguya's origins before, he couldn't ignore it any longer. That was because he had unknowingly received some kind of title. The title of a Jinchuriki. Naruto may not have had any proof, but he knew it deep in his gut. That word was the reason for his misery up until now. For all the hate he had endured up until now. So he had to know what it meant, no matter how much that might hurt him. We suppose it can't be helped. Kaguya sighed. We shall tell you. If she was being honest, she did not want to divulge this information to him. partially because it was mostly irrelevant now. No, it was wrong to say it was irrelevant. It was just that the circumstances of Naruto's condition had changed. However, because no one else actually knew about this change in circumstance, it was as if nothing had ever really changed at all. The truth became a lie, but no one knew that. So in the end, wasn't the reality in some way that it was still the truth? On the day of thy birth, thou became the Jinchuriki host of the Kyubi no Yoko. There was a moment's pause following her revelation where she wondered if he would understand what that meant. What she didn't expect were the sudden tears that rolled down Naruto's cheeks. Unlike normal tears, these ones were cold and silent. He was probably not even aware of them himself. So like he asked, voice hoarse and dry, I am the demon fox that attacked the village? That's why everyone hates me. That's why they're always so mean to me and won't let me play with the other kids. He collapsed to his knees, the sword he had been holding falling from his grip and clattering to the ground at his feet. No, that is not right. Kaguya walked up to him, taking his head in her arms and pulling him up against her shoulder, burying his face in her long white hair. She was reminded of how she used to comfort her own sons when they had hurt themselves. Only this wound was far more deep than anything they had ever experienced. Thou were merely its jailer. Of course, humanity is too ignorant to separate the two, so perhaps to them it is as thou say. Even she couldn't deny his words completely. No matter how much she wanted to. You keep talking about it like it's the past, but what does that mean? Naruto's hands slowly came back up, returning Kaguya's embrace and pulling her tight against him. He let out a choke sob, the tears flowing more freely now, yet somehow he also felt strangely comforted. Perhaps because he wasn't alone. He finally had someone that would look him in the eyes and tell the truth, no matter how hard that was for him. We already said? Thou art our Jinchuriki host now. Kyubi no Yoko is gone. She began stroking his hair, gazing out over the boulders he had just destroyed with his power not long before. Even with the power of heaven now in his hands, she was reminded that he was still a vulnerable boy. You mean like you ate it, or something? Naruto asked, somehow finding the strength to chuckle through his forced sobs. Just the idea of Kaguya coming into his shadow to eat the fox was enough to be funny even in this circumstance. However, as it was, he could no longer ignore the obvious question. So he asked, what even are you? We suppose it was only a matter of time before that question. Kaguya gazed up at the moon, debating how much to answer. Although, she supposed mixing in a bit of the truth into a fairy tale didn't sound too bad. Thou can just think of us as a moon rabbit that came down to earth to eat demons. Then we made a mistake and lost our own shadow binding us to thou. Even if it was a mistake, I'm glad you're here now. Naruto smiled, giving one last ragged breath as he finally calmed down and pulled away. Sitting on his knees was uncomfortable, so he shifted himself slightly, ending up in a cross-legged position on the forest floor. Kaguya turned herself over, pressing the little of her back into his chest and resting her head just below his chin. Together, the two sat for a while in silence. You know, I just thought of something, Naruto said, looking down at his yellow Rinnegan eyes again. They were facing up, looking at Kaguya from below, but he slowly started to turn them inwards as if to face them against one another. You talked about Inyo and all that stuff earlier, so if I used them at the same time, wouldn't I create some like even more crazy powerful jutsu than those last two? Kaguya realized what he was intending to do just in time, reaching down and grabbing both his wrists to prevent him from doing exactly what he was just thinking. We would advise against that, she warned. Even as just a test, there was a slight pause, as she turned once more to look at the object of her former imprisonment. Thou would destroy Konohagakure no Sato, she said, gazing up at the full moon. The power to destroy Konohagakure no Sato. That was what Kaguya had said, but Naruto could hardly bring himself to believe it. After all, there was no way he was suddenly that powerful. Certainly, what he had been able to do pushing and pulling large boulders was already pretty amazing, but not nearly on the same level as being able to wipe out a village. The worst part though was that he considered testing it out anyways. What had the village ever done for him? Nothing except cause him pain and anguish. Even then, he had never actually believed that he wanted to destroy it. Yet for that brief moment after learning he probably could, the temptation had been there. It was gone almost as fast as it had come. However, the fact that he had even for a split second considered it, that terrified Naruto, so much so that it had kept him awake nearly all night. Just when he had finally started nodding off to sleep and his alarm clock had gone off, having been set to wake him up in time to make it to the academy, he considered skipping school for today. What was even the point? It's not like they were going to be able to teach him to control his new powers. Kaguya had been pretty clear that he had to keep his Rinnegan eyes a secret for the time being as well. Apparently they were pretty famous eyes or something, although it seemed kind of like they came from a vague point in history, making them more of a legend than anything people truly believed in. So he didn't see the big deal in showing them off. Kaguya was the one saying it, however, so he would respect her wishes for the time being. She was his first real friend, after all. So he wasn't about to run the risk of screwing that up so soon after finally getting her to come out of his shadow. That said, but he couldn't afford to skip classes either, least of all this close to finally graduating. So against all odds, he managed to drag himself from bed and haul himself off to the academy. This time Kaguya didn't come out from his shadow, preferring to hide inside it as she had always done up until last night. While Naruto would have liked her to come out, even he knew she couldn't just walk into class with him, so he went to school much like he always did, alone. Entering the classroom moments before the bell rang, Naruto let out a loud yawn. Hey, Uzumaki, his homeroom teacher, a chunin known as Mizuki, warned him with a sneer. Whether it was about his near tardiness or clear lack of sleep, Naruto didn't care and promptly ignored him, taking the stairs up to the back of the class where he planned to resume his nap. What's with the new get-up, Naruto? Some fatty die and you take this clothes? One of the students called, noticing the new white shorts several sizes too big. A chorus of guffaws and laughter rang out from the class, several others conspicuously pointing at him as he walked by. Shut your stupid mouth, Kiba. Naruto growled, not even turning to look at the one who made the snide remark. One of the biggest bullies in his class and the apparent heir to the Inuzuka clan as the eldest son, Inuzuka Kiba, was an arrogant loudmouth with the fighting prowess to back it up. His beast-like movements made him number 2 in terms of their class spars, only one other able to best him. Naruto, for the record, was the dead last, meaning he had never won a single round against anyone to date. With only about a month left now too. So yeah, he really wanted to unleash the power of his Rinnegan eyes. If only to see the look on Kiba's face as he was sent flying. Finally reaching the back of the classroom, Naruto plopped down at his unusual spot between the two people he could say he got along with best in the class. Of course, to get along with was mostly a relative term in this regard. Neither of them were someone he could call a friend. For that matter, they never even really talked at all, which was the way he preferred it. Nara Shikamaru was to his left, already dozing away just as Naruto planned to do. Possibly the closest thing Naruto had to a friend, Shikamaru never made fun of Naruto, but mostly because he was just too lazy to be bothered. Knowing him, he would say it was a pain to get involved, so while he never stuck up for him, he never joined in on the others' teasing either. Haruno Sakura was to his right and was the complete opposite of Shikamaru. Her nose was already buried in some textbook, preparing for today's lesson. If Naruto was the most hated boy in class, then she was the most hated among the girls. Unlike him, she was also the top student in the whole school academically speaking, which was the main source of the scorn she received from all the others. As a fellow victim of bullying, she left Naruto alone provided he didn't try talking to her. The moment he did, and it was likely a swift uppercut to the jaw. Together, the three of them would collectively be known as the unsociables among the rest of the students. Despite the shared name, this didn't make them a group of any kind. They were just 3 separate individuals that preferred to be alone. Well, maybe in Shikamaru's case this was actually true. It wasn't like Naruto himself wanted to be this way. He wanted to have friends and hang out with the others like a normal kid. It was just impossible for him. Now he finally knew why. Kaguya had told him about how he used to be the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, and how most of the adults mistakenly believed this meant he was the demon fox incarnate. This misconception led many of them to hate him and subsequently warn their children to stay away from him. So all the kids, including the vast majority of his class, had inherited that hate. In the past, Naruto had tried to imitate what the other popular kids, like Kiba, would do. So he would be loud, mess up on purpose or do pranks in order to get attention. At first that had worked, but soon the parents had told their kids to ignore him, and so he once again became isolated. After that, he gave up trying to make friends at all, and that was how he ended up as the 3rd member of the unsociables. Alright, class? Mizuki clapped his hands twice, getting everyone's attention. Now that all of us are here, he gave Naruto a dirty look as he emphasized who specifically they had been waiting for. Naruto rolled his eyes and put his head down, not caring to bother with someone else that apparently only saw him as some demon fox. Let's go over what we'll be doing today. I told you all last Friday before we broke for the weekend, but does anyone remember that can tell me what that was? Sakura closed her textbook, leaning forward on her desk to give her full attention forward. It used to be she would sit in the front of the classroom. Back when she had friends. After she had foolishly declared a crush on the top overall student in the class, however, she lost any mutual friends she once had and instead made only rivals. From then on, sitting in the front was a nightmare, leaving her back vulnerable to all kinds of pranks. Which is how she ended up back here, stuck with the 2 who were already entering the land of dreams. No one in front put their arm up to answer Mizuki's question, so seeing no other choice she decided to raise her own hand. Yes, Sakura. He called on her. As Sakura stood to answer, several snickers from the other girls around the class reached her ears. She didn't pay them any attention, lifting her chin high as she proudly recited the information no one else seemed to know, or at the very least didn't care enough to say. Today we will be discussing the history of the Hokage. Starting from the Shodai, who helped found the village, up to the current. She said, projecting her voice with as much confidence as she could muster. Having given her answer, she brushed back several strands of her long pink hair as she retook her seat. Very good. Mizuki nodded, turning to write the word Hokage up on the board. Most of you will be graduating next month, provided you pass the final exams. Once you do, you'll be official genin. That means real shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato. He pointed at the Hittite with the curved leaf symbol carved into it on his forehead. When you put this on, your life is no longer just your own. It is the express property of the Hokage. You will give your life for him and for the village. Does everyone understand that? Sir, yes, sir. A chorus of cries from nearly every single student called out in unison. Sakura's voice, of course, joined in with them. The only two who didn't were the two idiots next to her fast asleep. Excellent. Mizuki grinned in satisfaction, not even paying attention to Naruto or Shikamaru. He had long given up on either of them, it would seem. Now then, he continued, it was the plan today to jump right into the books, but instead we will begin by introducing a special visitor, one who has taken time out of his incredibly busy schedule to come and speak with you all about his responsibilities. Before he even finished his announcement, there was a sudden buzz of excitement from the gathered students. That's right. Mizuki confirmed their suspicions. Here to talk to you all today is the Godame Hokage himself, Shimura Danzo-sama. The door to the classroom slid open and the Hokage walked in. He was an elderly man, using a walking cane to supposedly support his balance. Yet despite that he walked straight and tall. Over the ceremonial Hokage Heiori he had a special sling of some kind to hold his right arm. His right eye too was covered in bandages that concealed half of his face and his spiky black hair. The other most noticeable feature was the X-shaped scar on his chin, his overall appearance telling a story rife with combat. Thank you for the introduction, Mizuki-sensei. Danzo smiled at the Chunin who stood now at attention before him. Why don't you take a seat while I take it from here? His one eye began to scan the class, pausing as it fell on the two sleeping in the back. Sakura felt a cold sweat break out, the power of his glare strong enough that she felt it despite not even being the target. Yet even in spite of this, either Naruto or Shikamaru seemed to notice it at all. Either they were really that tired or just that stupidly brave. She suspected a bit of both. Mizuki must have noticed too, because even though he hadn't cared about it earlier, he was taking measures now. Hey, wake up you bastards! He reached into a pouch strapped to his hip, pulling out two shuriken that he threw in their direction. Sakura bit her lower lip in an effort to stifle the startled cry she let out. The shuriken hadn't been meant to hit them, just grazing the top of their hair and sending short strands falling. It had the desired effect, both boys picking their heads up, eyes blinking groggily as they attempted to figure out what was going on. In Naruto's case, he already had a string of drool sticking to his chin. That was how deep and instant his sleep had been. Ah shit. Shikamaru seemed to realize their predicament first, sitting up straight for all of a second before slouching slightly back in his chair. It wasn't much, but it was probably the most respect he was going to be able to muster in the face of the Hokage. Naruto took a couple seconds longer, looking at the Hokage as if trying to place his face. Even he wasn't ignorant enough to not know who the Hokage was. Or so Sakura thought. Hey there, how's it going? Naruto asked, voice completely devoid of respect of any kind. For a moment it looked like he was about to put his head back down, not even waiting for an answer. Naruto! Mizuki wasn't going to have it, reaching for a second shuriken. Although this time with the intention of aiming it slightly more lethal than before. He only seemed to catch himself at the last second, taking a deep breath as he collected his nerves and slipped the partially drawn proceedicle back into its pouch. Since you seem to be on such good terms with Hokage-sama, why don't you do us the honors and give a brief history? Of course, what he was asking was impossible. He knew it, and every single student here knew it. Naruto had the worst test grades of every single student in the class. History was also famously his worst subject, to the point it was actually a miracle if he scored any points at all on the tests. No, Mizuki's only aim here could be to embarrass Naruto further in front of the Hokage. Sakura didn't understand why, but Naruto's unpopularity extended far beyond the limits of the classroom, and went even to the staff and teachers. She would have assumed it was just because he was a problem child, but even this was too much for that. Why me? Shikamaru was sleeping too. Naruto jumped to his feet, slamming his now gloved hands on the desk in front of him. Hey! Don't get me involved, damn you! Shikamaru, in contrast to Naruto's loud yell, only spoke to him in a hushed whisper, just loud enough for the three of them. Do you know the answer or not, Naruto? You're wasting Hokage-sama's time. Mizuki ignored his attempt at a redirect, pushing him to give out some kind of information. No, he was waiting for him to just say he had no idea. That was the only possible answer Naruto could give. Naruto gaped like a fish out of water, eyes darting back and forth. It was almost painful to watch at this point, Sakura instinctively flipping open the textbook to the page necessary to help him. Yet she didn't know how she was possibly supposed to slide it over discreetly enough for him to be able to read it without giving them both away, let alone while under the watchful eye of the strongest shinobi in the village. In the first place, why was she even trying to help him? She didn't owe Naruto anything. Getting involved with him would only make her more hated than she already was. It was just sad to watch him. That's right, nothing more than second-hand embarrassment. That was what she determined. Be quiet, you're not helping. Naruto suddenly whispered. She almost apologized out of reflex, but realized a second later she hadn't even said anything yet. What? Slow down. He kept talking to himself, lips barely moving. Sakura glanced at Shikamaru, who looked back at her, both of them shrugging as they had no idea who Naruto was suddenly talking to. Time's up, Naruto. Mizuki didn't appear to notice. Or if he did, he probably thought he was just trying to ask one of them for help. Just admit you don't know anything already. At that last crack, Naruto's blue eyes hardened into solid steel. He inhaled a deep breath, presumably about to admit defeat. History of the Hokage, right? Only that wasn't what happened next at all. The Shodai Hokage was Senju Hashirama, who founded the village alongside his one-time rival, Uchiha Madara. They joined their clans together, forming the first ever shinobi village and creating the title of Kage, something which was later copied by the other four great nations. His death marked the opening act of the Daiichiji Nikai Taisen. After being betrayed by Madara and the other villages, despite having given them Biju as a bargaining chip for peace, Sakura blinked. What was happening right now? The information Naruto was saying wasn't just right, it was detailed. Far more so than the summary page she had flipped open to. So he couldn't be reciting that. No, this was information he just knew. And he wasn't done. After his death, his brother Senju Tobirama became the Nidaime Hokage. He is most known for being the founder of this very ninja academy, and even took on students of his own, including the former Sandaime Hokage and the present Godaime. He met his death just before the end of the Daiichiji Nikai Taisen while battling against Kumogakure's Kinjin Kyodai. Just before his death, he named his student, Sarutobi Hiruzen, his successor. Unable to take it anymore, Sakura began flipping through her textbook. Had they studied all of this? No, Naruto had to be making some of this up because even she didn't know some of what he was saying. The Sandaime Hokage served the longest of any Hokage up to date, living through both the Dainiji Nikai Taisen and most of the Daisanji Nikai Taisen. He trained the group considered to have been Konoha's strongest ever team, the Sannin, before Orochimaru betrayed him at the end of the Daisanji Nikai Taisen. Thought to be conspiring with the Wagakure, Orochimaru attempted to assassinate the Sandaime, and the battle ended in both their deaths. Shikamaru flicked an eraser at Sakura, drawing her attention away from Naruto long enough to see him mouth out the words "What the heck is going on?" To which she could only shrug. She had been hoping he knew. Perhaps they had been studying together or something? Someone had to be teaching him, because there was no way he knew all of this stuff before now. Had he? After the war, Namikaze Minato, also known as Konoha's Kiroi Senko, was chosen as Yandaime Hokage after being recognized as a hero of the war that was largely responsible for a Konoha victory. He died. Naruto suddenly paused. There was a moment's hesitation where Sakura thought maybe he finally lost the train of thought. It only lasted for a second before he continued as if nothing ever happened. He died defeating the Kyubi no Yoko and saving the village from destruction. Having only served the village for a short time as its Hokage, the decision this time was made to elect someone who had survived numerous wars already. Thus Shimura Danzo was chosen, having been a student of the Nidaime and the Sandaime's former teammate. Naruto finished by inhaling deeply, as if just catching back all the breath he just let out. He then smiled cockily down at Mizuki, as if daring him to say he made a mistake or didn't know what he was talking about. I get all that right? Complete silence followed right after. No one said anything? That wasn't quite right. No one could say anything. Least of all Mizuki, who just continued to stare at Naruto, eyes bulging so far out of his head it looked like they might fall from his sockets. He wasn't alone in his surprise, every single student looking at Naruto with varying levels of wonder. He seemed to bask in their stares, placing his hands on his hips as he continued to smile triumphantly. The silence was finally ended by a slow, rhythmic clap. The noise drew everyone's attention from Naruto, looking once more to the Hokage. He had placed his cane against a nearby desk and slipped his right hand slightly from his sling. Not much, just enough to be able to clap into his hand with the left. Magnificent, he said, continuing to clap as he spoke. You must be very proud, Mizuki. He nodded to their teacher, who still didn't seem to have any sense for what had just happened. Under normal circumstances someone would think this wasn't Naruto, but some imposter that had just transformed themselves to look like him. Except it was surely impossible that the Hokage of all people wouldn't notice such a deception. Mizuki floundered lamely for words, unable to find any. I hope you all will take after Naruto's example. The Godaime already seemed to be ignoring him, speaking directly to the rest of the class. Our history is of the utmost importance. If we do not learn from it, we are doomed to make the same mistakes over and over again. This is why I have managed to maintain the longest period of peace of any Hokage before me. I looked at their failures and resolved myself not to fall into the same trappings. With that said, the Hokage picked up his cane and nodded to them all once more. Now if you will excuse me. I believe Mizuki-sensei already told you, but I am quite busy. Nevertheless, we shall meet again once you all become genin and I assign you to your first missions as shinobi of Konohagakure. Until then, continue your diligence. You will all make valuable assets to our military might. After that, he turned and left. Yet the arrival and subsequent departure of the Hokage was not on a single person's mind. In fact, with him gone they were able to once again turn their attention back to Naruto. Only to find he had once again put his head down on the desk. Peaceful snores signaled he was not faking it, but had once again genuinely fallen back asleep. Sakura considered for a moment slapping him back awake. Demand he tell her immediately how he knew all of that. Being the smartest one in the class, that had been her thing. Had he been bluffing this whole time? Lying to them about his intelligence? Or was there something else going on? Sakura had given up everything else. Her friends, the boys she once had a crush on. She threw away all those things and had carved out a single identity for herself. There was no test she couldn't ace and no question the teacher asked that she couldn't answer. Until now, that is. She thought maybe Shikamaru would agree with her. As the third member of the Unsociables, he had to be somewhat curious himself, surely. Only she was disappointed to find he appeared to not care at all. In fact, he seemed more envious of the sudden manner in which Naruto had once again reclaimed sleep, for he too put his head back on the desk, having already put what had just happened behind him. Right, well, class? Let's open our textbooks. Not just Shikamaru, but Mizuki appeared to have given up on figuring it out. Although in his case it seemed more like he was just trying to pretend it hadn't happened. Of course, it was just some kind of fluke or a group hallucination. If they pretended it never happened, it would be like it really hadn't. As if everyone at once decided to start thinking the same thing, the rest of the class also returned to their forward-facing positions, opening the textbooks as instructed. It was communal denial. What had just happened was so outside the realm of possibility that they all just agreed that it didn't happen. Everyone except Sakura, who wasn't about to just let this go. If Naruto thought he could get away with having deceived them all this time, then he had another thing coming. All that information he just sprouted? She had already memorized it. After school today, she would go to the library and fact-check every sentence. Down to the word, she would make sure he hadn't made a single mistake. She wouldn't stop there. She would find out how he had gotten so smart. Then she would prove to him that she wasn't about to lose. If it was the last thing she did, Haruno Sakura would find out the truth about Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto felt like he was at full power now. After sleeping through all of the last class, he was finally well rested enough to face whatever challenges the rest of the day might bring. Just in time too, as the next class was going to be individual sparring matches. The whole class had been guided out from the building and into a wide courtyard in the back. The entire way, however, it felt like something was different. Naruto couldn't say exactly what it was, but it was like everyone was looking at him. The truth be told, for a long time now he usually felt some kind of gaze was on him here in the academy. However, that gaze was always gentle, almost nervous even. This wasn't like that. It was strong, emitting some kind of challenging pressure. Which was fine by him. If someone wanted to go, he would take them on any time. Alright everyone, line up. Mizuki commanded, the class doing as he said and falling into place at the edge of the courtyard. Naruto, Sakura, and Shikamaru ended up at the far end, the three of them slightly separated from the rest of the class by a small gap in the line. As with most things concerning those three, but Mizuki didn't pay it much mind. He held up a clipboard, the list of matches for the day already decided and written on it. Haruno Sakura and Hyuga Hinata, come forward. He read aloud the first match. Sakura clicked her teeth, stalking forward with hard steps and her pink hair waving violently behind her. Naruto didn't know what happened while he was asleep, but something had put her in a bad mood it would seem. Not that they talked much anyways, but he was going to be extra careful around her the rest of the day, he decided. As the other girl came forward from further down the line, Naruto was suddenly reminded about why he felt Kaguya's eyes were so familiar to him. Oh yeah, Hinata has the Byakugan, huh? He asked aloud, not speaking to anyone in particular. In general, he actually forgot about Hinata's existence whenever she wasn't in line of sight. He didn't feel like anyone could blame him as the girl literally had no presence. Despite the fact that she was actually kind of like himself, Shikamaru and Sakura. In that she was another one that didn't seem to have any friends in class, that is. However, unlike the Unsociables, it was more because of her status as the heiress to Konoha's strongest clan, the Hyuga. So even if the end result was the same, the conditions were different. Which is why she wasn't categorized as one of them. Naruto supposed he didn't hate Hinata, even if she was kind of dark, gloomy, and weird. She was another one that never really bullied him, but instead actually seemed terrified by his presence. Although now he kind of had an idea for why that might be. So getting along with her was out of the question. Huh? Despite having not been talking to anyone earlier, Shikamaru responded to his rhetorical question. Of course she has the Byakugan. She's been in our class for years now, you should know that. Seriously, are you smart now or are you still stupid? Make up your mind, it's annoying. The hell? You wanna fight? Naruto asked, narrowing his eyes as he glared at Shikamaru. In the first place, Naruto didn't understand what he was mad about, but that was the most he had ever heard him speak in a single breath before now. Just forget it. There was the Shikamaru he usually knew. Although Naruto still didn't get it, he was kind of relieved to see he was still the same as always. With whatever it seemed like temporarily resolved, he turned his attention forward and back to the two girls standing on the field. Ready? Mizuki asked as the girls took their places only several meters apart while facing one another. Without words they both nodded, lifting their hands and holding 2 fingers in front of them as a sign of the seal of confrontation. Shinobi Q might start. The 2 girls were off like a flash. Their forearms collided as they closed the distance between one another. As their match began, Naruto felt a tiny hand pulling at the bottom of his pant leg for attention. "Thou shalt listen to us without speaking." Kaguya spoke from within his shadow for only him to hear. "We desire information from the young man to thy right. He is from the Nara clan if we recall?" Naruto opened his mouth to respond, catching himself at only the last second and nodding instead. No one else appeared to be paying attention to him right now, their eyes all glued to the match. He also didn't feel any of those gazes from earlier. Not the timid one, or the challenging stare either. "We have heard rumors about the Nara clan and their ability to manipulate shadows." Kaguya started to explain, but even with just that, Naruto had a pretty good idea where this was going. "If thou could get him to explain their technique, or even just demonstrate it, we would be in thy favor." So it came to that after all. He shrugged, hoping that was somehow enough to convey his intention. Kaguya didn't know Shikamaru like Naruto did, but there was almost no way he was going to tell just him about his clan's secrets. Asking him to perform the jutsu was even more impossible. Not because he would be afraid of Naruto somehow stealing the jutsu. They both knew that was impossible, after all. It was just that it would be too troublesome and Shikamaru wasn't about to do anything that required effort. So he had no idea how she wanted him to get Shikamaru's cooperation. "Do not fret." Kaguya seemed to already have something in mind for that too. "Thou might not realize it, but if it comes to a trade of information, then thou already possesses something he too desires." Naruto had no idea what she meant by that, but he was starting to get used to it by this point. The important thing was, all he had to do was just ask, right? From there everything was supposed to somehow work itself out. "Hey," Shikamaru. Naruto rubbed the back of his head awkwardly, not sure how to go about asking someone for a favor. Normally he would fall back to his typical false bravado, just shouting his way through it all, but he got the feeling that wasn't going to work. "What?" Shikamaru asked, turning away from the fight. Unlike the rest of the class, he really had no interest in who was better than who. It wasn't like he would ever win any of his sparring bouts either, making him kind of like Naruto in that regard. "I was just wondering if you would show me that shadow thing you do during your match?" Naruto asked, catching Shikamaru off guard. His mouth gaped open as he became unsure how to answer. In the first place, he had never used the jutsu while at the academy. That's because it was a clan secret technique. He wasn't just supposed to show it off. What's more, it was a pain in the ass. He would have to actually put in effort during his fight to use the jutsu, let alone catch someone in it. Naruto surely knew that, but in the first place, how did he even know about the jutsu? Certainly it wasn't unusual for a fellow ninja clan of Konoha to know about the infamous Nara clan and their Kajibari. For Naruto to know about it, however, was something he would have thought impossible. No, in the past that might have been true. After that little stunt in front of the Hokage, however, it was certainly possible that this current Naruto would know about that. Even if he knew about it though, why would he suddenly have an interest in seeing it? Even thinking about the why and the how was a pain in the ass. So Shikamaru made up his mind to at least prioritize the how for now. "Tell you what," he said, slipping his hands in his pockets, eyes studying Naruto for some kind of reaction, no matter how small. "I'll show you the Kageme no Jutsu, if you can tell me when you suddenly became so knowledgeable about Konoha history." From within Naruto's shadow, Kaguya gave a victorious smirk. It was exactly as she had planned. Naruto up until this point knew nothing about history. No, he still didn't really know anything. During his little speech earlier, he had just been reciting the words as she fed them to him, as predicted, but this caused quite the stir among his classmates who couldn't comprehend what had happened. Even the normally nihilistic Nara Shikamaru couldn't ignore this incredible gap in supposed intelligence. Naturally, he would want to know what the cause of it was. So much so, he would have no choice but to agree to a simple exchange of information. With this, Kaguya's primary objective was almost complete. If she was lucky, her secondary objective might also be achievable. "Tell him about that man that gave thou those gloves," Kaguya instructed from the shadow. "Just giving the name shall be fine." In response to this, Naruto turned slightly around, glancing down at his shadow as he gave her a dissatisfied look. She wished he wouldn't be so obvious about how he communicated with her, but it probably wasn't enough to risk exposing them. After all, her existence was outside the realm of normal considerability. "Have you ever heard of some guy called Kakashi?" Naruto asked, turning away from his shadow and back to Shikamaru. As Kaguya had hoped, a small light of recognition dawned in the Nara boy's eyes. "Oh, you can't possibly mean that Hatake Kakashi?" Shikamaru responded to Naruto's question with one of his own, eyes darting to the gloves too big for Naruto's hands. "As in, the famous copy ninja that stole over 1,000 jutsu? My dad talks about the guy like he's a modern legend. Is that what's going on? He's been the one teaching you all this stuff?" With that, Kaguya's second objective was complete. Shikamaru didn't even know it, but he just gave her the information she needed. Instead of a proper give and take, she had Naruto tell a simple lie and Shikamaru incorrectly filled in the blanks all by himself. In doing so, he inadvertently told Kaguya about the identity of the mysterious man that had helped them out the night before. Kaguya's knowledge was vast, but it wasn't all-encompassing. In particular, her shadow had spent a large majority of its time manipulating the reincarnations of Indra and Azura. So while she had a vast knowledge of the Senju and Uchiha clans, along with much of what they influenced, she lacked much of any real information outside of that. In particular, the less important individuals of more modern history were especially difficult for her to get information on. Once her shadow had lost its sense of existence and merged with Naruto, she too lost her primary way to gather information on the outside world. The only path left for her was to pay attention in Naruto's place, as he usually slept through history classes. Even that didn't give her much. For example, she learned of the Nara clan and their abilities through this method, but it lacked any of the real details she needed to make use of it. Now that might finally change, as she had a way to ask a member of the Nara clan directly. This kid was going to be surprisingly beneficial for her, giving both information about his own clan and the individual known as Hatake Kakashi, all the while thinking he had discovered some great mystery himself. This was why she liked the smart ones, as they were the easiest to deceive. "Winner, Hyuga Hinata!" Mizuki called out, signaling the end of the match and turning all their attention back to the two girls that had just been fighting. Like with Naruto, Sakura rarely won any of her sparring matches. She may have been the best in academics, but she was near the bottom when it came to actual physical ability. Of course, it was only natural she would lose against someone with the same Byakugan eyes that Kaguya herself had. Although if she was being honest, she was disappointed if this was all the current heiress to the Hyuga clan was capable of. Even against a weaker opponent like Sakura, she had struggled to bring the match to a swift and easy conclusion. Instead, she gasped for breath as she reached over to her downed opponent, offering the seal of reconciliation. Sakura accepted it, the two wrapping their index and middle fingers around one another and drawing the match to an official close. As the two began to step off the courtyard, Mizuki looked down once more at his clipboard. The next match is Naruto Shikamaru and Uchiha Sasuke. He looked back purposefully at the former. "Double time it, Nara. I don't want to wait all day for you. We got other matches to get through. You better uphold your end now," Naruto said at the same time, glancing at Shikamaru as he started to stalk forward. Yeah? He grumbled tiredly, although it was unsure which one of them he was actually responding to. Kaguya had no worry he would protect his promise, however. Honor was still an important trait, even in the modern era, for most anyways, although the same might not be able to be said about the Uchiha clan. Uchiha Sasuke was the last surviving member of the clan in the village. The clan of Madara, who helped create Konohagakure, was reduced to just him after his brother slaughtered all the rest of them. Ironically, it would have been the same night that Kaguya's imperfect resurrection had been completed. Yet the coincidences didn't end there. No, Kaguya suspected something on this scale couldn't be contributed to mere coincidence. The same night that Indra's most recent reincarnation lost everything, Azura's reincarnation became Kaguya's vessel. It was as if something much larger was at work, manipulating those two beyond even the shadows. Kaguya didn't like it. As Uchiha Sasuke, Indra's reincarnation, took the field opposite Naruto Shikamaru, she studied him with her Byakugan. Even now she could clearly see that ugly chakra clinging to him. As Uchiha Sasuke's hate grew, desire for the revenge of his clan pushed him further and further into that dark chakra, making them practically one and the same. As he would only become more of a danger to her existence. Sooner rather than later, she would also have to deal with him. For now, however, she was far more interested in studying the shadow manipulation techniques of the Nara clan. Perhaps in that, she could find some kind of hint towards her freedom. If not, at the very least a way to make things easier for herself and Naruto. Although she was starting to wonder if Shikamaru was really going to even try. What a pain, Shikamaru groaned, looking up at the clouds. Why did it have to be Sasuke of everyone that he had to fight? The top fighter, even above Kiba in his animalistic fighting style, Sasuke had never once lost in a fight. Ordinarily that wasn't a big deal, since Shikamaru would just let the match end in the first couple moves. It wasn't like he even had to try, as he wasn't expected to win anyways. Except now he had to show his jutsu to Naruto. Damn it. Why did he agree to this in the first place? The information hadn't even been worth it. The truth was far more boring than what he or anyone else had been imagining. When you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So while it certainly seemed crazy that the famous Hatake Kakashi had started mentoring Naruto, it was far more believable than anything else that could possibly explain it. If anything, it was more incredible Naruto had managed to cram all that information in his head in such a short period of time. Shikamaru felt stupid for having been surprised by it now. What's more, that he had to keep his word because of that blunder. Ready? Mizuki asked of them. Sasuke had already held his fingers up in the seal of confrontation, eyes bearing into Shikamaru with the intent to kill. It would have been unnerving, but Shikamaru could tell it wasn't really him that he was looking at. Sasuke was seeing some ghost of his past. That was what he really wanted to kill. Not seeing much choice, Shikamaru also held his fingers up, indicating he was ready to begin at any moment. Shinobi Q might start. The match began with Sasuke taking off at Shikamaru in a dead sprint. It wasn't ideal for Shikamaru, but he had at least predicted it would start off this way. Sasuke always won because he was brutal and effective, looking to settle every match in as few moves as possible. Shikamaru was also known for having his matches settled quickly, but in reverse. For him, it was how many moves did he have to put forward before he could convincingly throw the fight. Everyone knew this, so it was that common knowledge he was going to take advantage of. He had already molded the necessary chakra. All he needed to do was drop into stance and form the hand signs. He had only 2 seconds to do this before Sasuke reached him. It wasn't a lot by any means, but it was enough. Sasuke stopped short of Shikamaru, fist centimeters from having drilled into his face. You bastard, he hadn't stopped short of his own will, of course. It would be more accurate to say he had been forced to stop. The moment he had entered the range of Shikamaru's shadow, Kagemain no Jutsu, complete. Shikamaru grinned, rising from the crouch he had dropped into while casting the jutsu. Exactly as he planned, but Sasuke hadn't even been worried about dodging it. Even if he knew what he was running into it, he wouldn't have tried, because it was obviously a bluff, or so he believed. After all, Shikamaru wasn't about to try in a fight. It was that belief that allowed him to be caught. What are you playing at? Sasuke sneered, the venomous look in his eyes growing deeper and more resentful with every passing second. Shikamaru just ignored him with a click of the teeth, turning to face the line of other students. Not without struggle, because as he did, Sasuke was involuntarily forced into doing the same along with him, mimicking each and every one of Shikamaru's movements. Of course, Sasuke was going to resist being forced to move against his will, and so was fighting with every ounce of strength he had. This made Shikamaru's own movements stilted and awkward. It was also draining his chakra fast. He had probably another minute before he would be forced into canceling it. Hey Naruto! This is enough, right? Shikamaru called, he and Sasuke raising a hand over their head and waving in the blonde's direction. Once again, every single eye of the class was turned to look at him. Naruto didn't seem to mind though, ignoring them all as he answered Shikamaru with a huge grin and a thumbs up. What are you doing, Shikamaru, you jerk? One of the girls yelled out. It was immediately followed by a chorus of agreements and booing from the majority of the other women in the class. To them, seeing their beloved Sasuke humiliated like this was too much, mistaking Shikamaru and Naruto's interaction for some planned prank on the most popular boy among the girls. I knew this was going to be a pain. Shikamaru sighed as he undid the jutsu. His shadow hadn't even completely retreated back to its normal form yet before Sasuke was on him. Shikamaru shouted too late, his cheeks smashed into the dirt. Sasuke pressed his foot down on Shikamaru's back, holding both his wrists behind him in either hand. Apologize. Sasuke whispered darkly, pushing down on Shikamaru's back and pulling at his wrists to emphasize what would happen if he didn't. I won't ask twice. The terrible look in his eye told Shikamaru he was serious too. All that hatred that had been aimed somewhere else before was coming to bear, right down on him. My bad. Sorry. Shikamaru couldn't bring himself to sound sincere anyways, finding the angrier Sasuke became, the more nihilistic about it he actually felt. Also, I'd like to give up now if that's alright. He glanced over at their teacher who had frozen in place, staring at the two of them with no idea what to do. Alright. Mizuki said lamely, his voice lacking any authority at all. The winner of the match is Uchiha Sasuke. A chorus of cheers from the majority of the girls immediately followed the announcement. Sasuke didn't even look like he heard them. Despite claiming the victory, the Uchiha survivor seemed far from pleased with the results. Regardless, he dropped Shikamaru's wrists and pulled his foot from his back as he turned to walk away. Finally, that's over. Shikamaru grumbled, picking himself up to turn around and offer the seal of reconciliation. Only Sasuke apparently had no plans to return the gesture, stalking back over to his place in line as the girls continued to shower him in praises. If it had been anyone else, Mizuki would have been yelling at them to properly protect the village's tradition. As with always, but the Uchiha heir was given a free pass. Not that Shikamaru cared, as he didn't want to reconcile with that jerk anyways. Picking himself up, he returned to his spot in the line. Sakura was one of the only 2 girls that hadn't cheered for Sasuke, but she looked far from approving of what Shikamaru had done during the match. Not that he cared what some goody two-shoes thought about him, far more interested in what Naruto had to say as he took his place between the two. Well? He asked the blonde, who nodded at him in gratitude. Yep, it seems like that was enough. Thanks. Naruto giggled, holding both hands behind his head. But Shikamaru wasn't nearly as happy about the results as Naruto seemed to be. What the heck did he mean by that? He was the one who asked, damn it. So why was he answering like it was none of his concern? Shikamaru wanted to ask, but he had gotten far too involved already, and look where that got him. From here on it was just in his best interest to drop it, he decided. Uzumaki Naruto and Inuzuka Kiba. There was no more time to talk anyways, Naruto's turn having come. Of course, it didn't seem to be a coincidence that all 3 of the unsociables were called to fight first and against the top combatants in the class no less. Naruto didn't care about such things, of course. All there was to do was what he always did, give it his all and hope for the best. It didn't matter who his opponent was. In fact, for him the stronger the better. That way when he finally came out on top he would be able to show them all. It was their mistake to underestimate him. We do not desire to remind thou, but do not use thy Rinnegan. No matter what. Kaguya called out to him from within his moving shadow. I got it already. Naruto mumbled under his breath, having gotten far enough away from everyone to be able to talk back at least a little. He stopped in the middle of the courtyard just as Inuzuka Kiba stopped opposite of him. His opponent gave a feral grin, no doubt predicting an easy match. You're not going to be able to fake your way out of this one, loser, Kiba said, raising a hand to form the seal of confrontation. Although his words were already confrontational enough. I don't know what kind of trick you used to sound so smart during history, but don't get cocky. I'll remind you of your place in just a second. Bring it on, Naruto retorted, returning the seal of confrontation. Mizuki raised his hand to start the fight. Just before he could do that, Kaguya once again spoke. Listen to us. Relax thy muscles and no matter what happens, do not move, she said. Naruto didn't get a chance to ask what she meant, having time to do not much more than decide in that instant to trust her. Shinobi Q might start. Mizuki dropped his hand and the fight began. Kiba dropped to all fours and dashed forward, his movements more like a beast than any man. It was this fighting style that made him the top in the class, only Sasuke able to overcome this unique and vicious style of combat. It went without saying, but Naruto had never been able to overcome it himself, until now that is. Kiba lunged at Naruto like a leaping canine, both hands swiping at him not as fists, but sharp claws. With such an aggressive assault, it was no wonder no one could stand up to him. Even veteran genin might feel pressured under such an attack. Yet Naruto did not retreat, nor did he attempt to retaliate. He did as Kaguya said and remained completely still in the face of this pressure, trusting the word of the girl in his shadow. And she did not let him down, because despite not having any will to move, his body began to on its own. Naruto's arms came up, catching Kiba's twin slashing strikes by the wrist. Wah dash! Kiba didn't have time to question what happened, Naruto taking advantage of his surprise to swing his head forward. The top of his forehead smashed into Kiba's nose, sending the beastly boy stumbling back. It didn't end there, Naruto dropping low and swinging his leg around in a sweeping kick that caught Kiba in the side of the legs, knocking his balance out from under him. Kiba was sent sprawling to the ground on his back, letting out a cough as the wind was knocked from him. A second later Naruto was on top, one hand gripping him by the throat, the other coming down on top of him, the fist stopping just short of smashing his face in. All movement stopped there, and Naruto felt some control return to his body. As we believe the Nara brat said earlier, Kage main no jutsu, complete. Kaguya's voice was smug, filled with satisfaction at having finally regained some control of her freedom. Well, it is only natural that we would be able to use this jutsu. It would appear it is a type of Yin chakra manipulation, and we are the progenitor of all chakra, after all. Still, be glad thy opponent was some barely trained brat. This type of imperfect control would not cut it against a superior foe. However, this jutsu will have other uses that we desire. Having confirmed we can use it will benefit us both. Kaguya was able to slowly explain this at her leisure, because for the second time that day everyone was completely silent. Once again caught off guard by Naruto's unnatural display of talent. No one could say anything in the face of what happened, even Naruto himself was still surprised. The one thing he did understand was that Kaguya didn't appear capable of just taking control of his body whenever she wanted. In the first place, she had needed him to relax his muscles so she could manipulate him as freely as she just had. If he attempted to supersede control back from her, he would probably win that battle. It was the same way Shikamaru's movements had been dull earlier, Sasuke struggling against having his shadow moved against his will. In other words, control over his body was safely in his hands still. As the reality of that settled in, his lips parted in a victorious grin. He could feel Kiba's labored breathing between the fingers that held his throat. Blood oozed out of a broken nose and silent tears ran down his eyes, making him unable to even see the dominant position Naruto looked down at him from. He slowly looked up, taking in the shocked gazes of every student. He met their wide-eyed stares with a fierce glare of his own as if to tell them all that from now on things were different. He wasn't the dead last anymore. No longer was he just some worthless existence that they could all look down on. He had real power now. Even without using the Rinnegan, he could learn to fight like this. Kaguya could control his shadow if he let her, so she could teach him. This is good enough, ain't it, Mizuki-sensei? Naruto asked, looking last at his teacher. The Chunin that was supposed to be the one helping him all this time. Everyone else had their families to help them, but before now the only one Naruto could rely on was Mizuki. Yet he had never been there for him when he needed it. He preferred to just watch him as he failed and laugh about it afterwards. Well, Naruto was the one laughing now. He finally had someone he could rely on. Someone that would help make him powerful, more powerful than everyone else in class. Even stronger than Sasuke. Naruto had finally found his path. Mizuki blinked at Naruto as if finally aware of what had just happened. His eyes trailed down, looking at Kiba, who was still trapped and bleeding beneath Naruto's grip. Then they trailed back up to the smiling blonde. There wasn't just shock anymore, but fear. As if he just realized he had awoken the sleeping fox. With no other choice, he held out a hand and said the words Naruto had been waiting all these years to finally hear. Winner, Uzumaki Naruto. The rest of the day at the academy went by almost too fast for Naruto. He had no idea being in school could be so fulfilling. After kicking Inuzuka Kiba's ass, no one knew what to say to him. In fact, they all seemed terrified of him. That was good. He had given them the chance to be his friend. Yet they shunned and rejected him at every turn, inheriting their parents' hate without question. Those same parents that glared at him now, all of them waiting in the courtyard to pick their kids up for the day. In the past, those glares used to terrify him. To the point he would generally hide inside, waiting for most of the other kids to leave before finally skulking out for himself. Today he didn't mind, matching their glares with one of his own as he walked past. Naruto was no longer afraid of them. He had no reason to be afraid anymore, because he had power now. The liberating feeling of power was literally in the palms of his hands. For the first time in his life he was able to walk with his head held high, knowing there was nothing these people could do to hurt him anymore. Even the loneliness of seeing the other kids running into their parents' loving embrace wasn't enough to crush his spirits. That was because he wasn't alone either, no matter how much it looked like he might be. For in his shadow was the one person in the world that cared for him. That would look after him and make him stronger, the one that had shown him how to use this new, invigorating power. We are glad to see thou art in a good mood. Kaguya, the very girl he had to thank for all this, said from within his shadow. At the moment it was impossible for her to come out. Not until night had fallen and their training began could he meet her face to face and properly speak with her. However, do not forget that we need thy cooperation. There is much that must yet be done. Yeah? Naruto spoke out loud, not caring who he let hear him. It wasn't like anyone was going to pay attention to him anyways. I just have to go to the library, right? Apparently Kaguya wanted more information on that Hatake Kakashi guy that helped them out the night before. Naruto didn't see what the big deal was, so what if some guy finally helped him after all this time? Certainly he was an anomaly, but Kaguya seemed to be concerned about him for some reason. He couldn't exactly ignore a request from Kaguya, even if he didn't see the point in it. She couldn't walk around by herself, after all, and it wasn't like he didn't owe her for this sudden turn of fortune. So he set out to the library at her request, making his way through the fading twilight streets of Konoha. The public library wasn't far from the academy in the first place. Just a couple blocks away, but at this time very few people would be heading in this general direction. The path linking the academy to the library was especially abandoned, most of the leaving students and their parents taking the opposite path that would lead them to the residential areas of the village. Of course, this made the path he walked the perfect type of place for something like what happened last night to occur. That time, he had been unprepared, but he wasn't about to let someone strike him from the rear twice in as many consecutive days. Our Origi-sama, Kaguya warned, having sensed the danger approaching at the same time he did. I know already, Naruto said, body tensing as he prepared for combat. Hey, I know you said not to use the Rinnegan, but just a little is fine, right? There was no time to wait for any kind of response. Naruto had already committed himself to having to act. A fist flew at him from behind. Naruto leapt to the side, dodging out of the way at the last possible second. As he spun to face his aggressors, he once again found himself face to face with three of them. Unlike the last time, where they had been drunk young adults, it was now his classmates. Kids so otherwise insignificant he had never even learned their names. Yo, Naruto. The one that had thrown the first punch greeted him, standing up straight. You certainly seem to be in good spirits, huh? He slowly started to stalk to the left. Don't start thinking you're hot shit after one good day, you bastard. A fatter boy took up a position directly in front of him. To Naruto's rear was a brick fence. We don't know what kind of dirty tricks you used to beat Kiba, but even you aren't going to be able to take on three of us at once. The last boy hung back from the way they all came from, completing the entrapment and boxing off any possible escape for Naruto provided he kept to flat ground, which was fine for him. He had no intention of going anywhere. What's the matter, guys? Naruto asked, a confident smirk smearing his face. He had yet to draw his hands from his pockets, but he was already channeling the chakra necessary to discharge an attack at any moment. Ain't you got to go home with you mommies? At least we have moms, you orphan bastard. The same one who threw the first punch came running in again. At the same time the other two also started to charge, closing in on Naruto from three sides. In the past, such a fight would be impossible for him to win. As he was now, Naruto didn't see how he could lose. Let's fucking go! He roared, pulling his right hand from his pocket. From beneath the glove, his Rinnegan eye opened, Naruto unleashing the Bansho Tenin on the boy that charged first. Not with enough force to move a whole boulder maybe, but instead just targeting the boy's face. To his opponent, it simply felt like some unknown force pushed on him from the back of the head. Well, he didn't have time to react, falling forward as if tripping and flying into Naruto's right hook. Needless to say, but the two forces colliding into him from opposite directions had devastating effects. He was already unconscious before the punch followed all the way through. The fat one in the middle stopped short at the suddenly unexpected and brutal one-hit knockout. That mistake cost him any kind of chance to counterattack, Naruto thrusting into his gut with an open left-handed palm strike. The moment Naruto's palm made contact, he unleashed the Shinra Tensei, despite the boy's weight, making it impossible for a strike of any kind to send him flying. That was exactly what happened, as he was knocked airborne to the brick fence on the opposite side of the road with enough force that the back of his head cracked open against the sudden collision. He dropped to his knees, eyes rolling up into the back of his head as he too lost consciousness. "You bastard!" The third of his assailant's voice cracked, but he committed to the attack, swinging at Naruto's face with a wild haymaker. Naruto turned his left hand on him too, once more unleashing the Shinra Tensei. Only nothing happened. He wasn't able to use his attack. He was going to get hit. At least, he should have been. But the last boy suddenly froze up. A quick glance down told him why. His shadow had shifted, Kaguya manipulating it to merge with his assailant's shadow and stop his movements. "There is a slight gap of time between charges of thy Rinnegan." Kaguya answered his unasked question, explaining why he hadn't been able to use Shinra Tensei just now. "We suspect about 5 seconds. Perhaps in the span of life, it is but a moment, but in a battle, 5 seconds is an eternity. Do not forget this." "Yeah," Naruto acknowledged, jumping in the air and delivering a spinning kick that connected to the side of the frozen boy's temple. Like the last two, he slumped down to the street in an unconscious heap. "Thanks for the save," he added as an afterthought. The fight had lasted less than those 5 seconds he would have needed to recharge the power in either eye, so he understood she wasn't just saying that. It was the harsh truth. Blood dripped down from the knuckles of his right hand. Not his blood, but the blood of the boy's face he punched in. The first two were bleeding profusely, enough so that he was afraid for a moment he overdid it. The fatty who flew into the wall looked especially gruesome, blood oozing from the back of his head and staining the street he lay on. "This might be bad for me, huh?" he asked. It hadn't been his intention to put that much power into the Shinra Tensei, but apparently he still didn't have much control over it yet. Yet Naruto didn't feel any guilt. He thought for sure he should. No, if this had been the day before, he would have definitely been beside himself with panic, wondering what he was going to do if he got caught. Him right now, however, didn't feel much of anything. Elated that he won, perhaps. But certainly not remorseful for his actions. They had started it, just like those three last night, and they had paid for it far worse than these three had. Was that why he couldn't feel anything looking at them now? Was the shock from last night still that much stronger than even this? He personally didn't know. How was he supposed to sort his own feelings anymore? It felt like he was becoming a different person. "There is someone else here," Kaguya warned him yet again. Naruto's head jerked up, eyes quickly darting back and forth to find the last intruder. Unlike the last three, he hadn't even heard anyone else approaching. He still couldn't find them even now. "Behind the lamppost," Kaguya clarified, having used her Byakugan to scan the surrounding area for witnesses. "Hey! Come out!" Naruto turned to the nearest streetlight. A pole so slim he didn't think it was possible anyone could possibly be hiding behind it. Yet he was proven wrong as a petite girl stepped out from around the side of it, having realized she was exposed. "Hinata?" he asked in surprise, lowering the palm he had raised almost subconsciously, prepared to pull in whoever his last possible attacker might be. What he hadn't expected was the shy girl in his class, let alone the only other person he knew with the same eyes as Kaguya. "I'm sorry," the girl whispered, her voice barely loud enough for him to hear with the distance between them. "I didn't mean to spy on you, I saw them coming to attack you and she trailed off, eyes darting this way and that, unable to meet his gaze." As she talked, her hands had risen to the front of her chest and she pushed her index fingers together, the sign of some nervous tic. "You came to back them up then?" Naruto growled, blue eyes hardening as he stared her down. While it was true that Hinata was one of the rare few that never bullied him, it appeared to be because she was afraid of him this whole time. So maybe she had finally seen her chance to have him taken down? That was the only assumption he could make out of the given information. And no, that's not it. Yet Hinata quickly refuted him, shaking her head and waving both hands as if to fervently deny his claim with every part of her being. Even then, she still failed to give a reason. Taking a deep breath, she calmed herself ever so slightly and for perhaps the first time managed to meet Naruto's eyes. "For now, please get out of here, Naruto-kun. I will go get the teacher to get these three help. And I won't tell anyone I saw you here. I promise." "Why?" Naruto's shoulders went lax. Not because he was dropping his guard, but because he was generally at a loss for what was happening at the moment. This weird, gloomy, shy girl that had never helped him before was suddenly offering to cover for him. It was no wonder he couldn't understand. "For now, it is best thou do as she asks," Kaguya advised him gently. "It is not a bad deal for us. If any of these three were to die with visible corpses, it will only cause problems. In such an open area we cannot just turn them to ash like those of yesternight." Kaguya didn't need to say it, but the odds that any of them would say the truth of what happened was slim. Their pride would not allow it, and they had reason to fear Naruto now. The only concern was if Hinata would be true to her word. At the moment, that was a risk they had to take. So Naruto relented with a nod. Well, whatever the reason is, thanks, Hinata. I owe you. He turned around to take off, but just before he did he couldn't help but catch the deep red blush on her face. No time to think about it for now, he left the scene behind him and took off running towards the library. As he jogged, he couldn't help but glance down at his shadow. An image of Kaguya came to his mind, in particular her Byakugan eyes. Is it possible she knows about you? Naruto couldn't dismiss the possibility. Like maybe she's helping out because you both have the same eyes? Kaguya was silent for several moments, and he almost wondered if she heard him. We do not think that is what happened, Kaguya finally answered. Although she didn't offer him any kind of alternative reasoning either, leaving him to only imagine for himself. Even so, it seemed odd to him. Just ignoring Hinata, but there had been Kakashi that helped him the night before for unknown reasons as well, both of them only coming to his rescue after Kaguya finally showed herself to him. For now, he wasn't going to get any answers on Hinata it would seem, but maybe Kaguya was right and they could find some answers why Kakashi helped them at the library. He had just arrived too, slowing his stride to a standard trot as he entered. It was his first time in Kanegakua's public library, but he hadn't expected it to be nearly this large. Multiple floors, each one teeming with shelves stuffed to the brim with scrolls. There was so much information here that he had no idea where to even start. Thou should ask the service desk, Kaguya advised, already having figured out why he stopped as soon as he stepped inside. Naruto grimaced at the idea, not looking forward to having to talk to anyone. None of the staff seemed to be aware of his presence yet, but he wasn't exactly hopeful for a warm welcome. Without any better options, he did as Kaguya suggested and began to approach the nearest counter. Excuse me? Naruto asked, voice suddenly timid in a way that reminded him of Hinata from just earlier. He hated that feeling as if all his confidence from before was stripped away. It would appear no matter how much he thought he was starting to change, he was still unsure of himself in new situations. His new power wasn't going to help him here either, as he couldn't just attack the staff if they didn't give him what he wanted. What do you want? As expected, but the welcoming smile of the lady at the desk immediately slipped from her face as she soon realized who it was that had called out to her. Just great. Naruto had to fight the urge to sigh out loud at the expected response. There was nothing to it now though. Can you tell me where any scrolls with information about the copy ninja, Hatake Kakashi, might be? He asked, just hoping to get it over with as soon as possible. The lady instead clicked her teeth. How should I know? You see how big this place is? Go find it for yourself if you want to know so badly. Now scram, I'm busy. As if to end the conversation there, she turned away from him and went back to sorting through a bin of scrolls she had been looking through earlier. Naruto felt his temper flare and before he could even think about it he slammed both hands on the desk. The reverberating noise caused the lady to jump and drew the attention of every other occupant in the library. The hell do you mean you don't know? He growled. Isn't it your job to know where the scrolls are? I'm not asking you to get them for me, just point me to anything you have on Hatake Kakashi and I'll go get it for myself. The woman sneered and it looked like she was about to tell him to go shove it when suddenly from next to Naruto, an handful of scrolls was dropped on the desk with enough force to make a sound comparable to when Naruto slammed down on it. I also want any scrolls you have on Hatake Kakashi, Haruno Sakura said, standing up straight and folding her arms in front of herself. Her emerald green eyes had a fire in them that even made Naruto nervous. She had run off ahead of everyone else the moment class ended, leaving even ahead of him. He had assumed to race home, but apparently it had been with the intent of coming here instead. Aren't you the girl that just asked for everything we had on the Hokage a few minutes ago? The librarian asked, looking back and forth between the two as if to figure out what kind of relationship they might have. You already have quite a few scrolls as it is, you can't possibly need more. She then looked down at the impressive stack just dropped onto the desk. Huh? Sakura asked as if talking to an idiot. Don't you know we have final exams coming up next month? Naruto and I need at least this much if we're going to compete for the top score in the class. Now it was Naruto who had no idea what she was talking about. Sakura surely knew he always scored dead last, so why would she make up such an obvious lie? Even if it was a lie, it seemed to get results. I understand. The lady inclined her head, but only a little. I'll point you in the direction of the scrolls on Hatake Kakashi. So it would seem she knew where they were after all. Not that this surprised Naruto, but it didn't piss him off any less. That wasn't enough for Sakura anymore, who shook her head. No, Naruto and I need to get studying right away. We'll be sitting right over there looking over what I already grabbed on the Hokage. Sakura pointed to a nearby desk before picking up half the armful of scrolls from earlier. Bring them to us once you have them. I want every scroll you have. I don't care if he's only mentioned once in it. The librarian's mouth flapped open and closed in disbelief at such an outrageous demand. You can't be serious, Naruto. Sakura was already ignoring her, turning to the blonde. Grab the rest of the scrolls and help me carry them over to the desk. We got to get started before it's too late. She didn't wait for an answer from either of them, already turning around and stalking away. Wait for me. Naruto's mind barely had a chance to catch up with what had happened. All he could do now was go along with it, picking up the scrolls as she asked and running after her. Behind him, he heard the librarian grumbling, but it would seem she was leaving to go get their scrolls as requested. Scary, Naruto mumbled under his breath. He had no idea Sakura could be so intimidating. What was that? Sakura shot him a dark look, having apparently heard what he said. He quickly shook his head as if to say he hadn't said anything. He began to walk to the opposite end of the desk, but Sakura pulled out the chair next to her. Where are you going? It will be more effective to study together if we're sitting next to each other, idiot. Oh, yeah? Of course. Naruto had no idea what was going on anymore. Sakura never talked to him. In fact, the few times he had tried to talk to her in the past, she had been pretty violent in her rejections. They may have both been part of the unsociables, but that didn't make them friends. Even so, he had always felt a kind of companionship with her over everyone else. That was because she was almost just as badly bullied as he was. So long as you were only talking about within the confines of the classroom, of course. To all the adults, she was treated normally. Thanks, by the way. Naruto mumbled as he took his seat next to her. It seemed like he was starting to say that a lot lately. Sakura now being the third person to offer him help since Kaguya. Just what was going on with his weird string of good luck lately? He couldn't help but wonder. I don't need your gratitude. Sakura snapped back at him, having already unrolled one of the scrolls containing information about the Shodai Hokage on it. If you really want to thank me, why don't you start by telling me your big secret? The sudden question caused Naruto to break out in a cold sweat. A secret? He tried to play dumb voice hoarse. He glanced down nervously at his shadow. If Kaguya thought there was a possibility she was going to be exposed, would she attack Sakura? Turn her to ash like those three the night before? He didn't want that. Sakura wasn't his friend, but she was someone he could at least somewhat sympathize with. Also, she just helped him out. Although apparently not for free. Sakura's emerald eyes shot in his direction, and she slapped the scroll on the table once again. Don't play dumb with me, she snarled, pointing a finger into his chest with enough force to slightly push him back. You've been hiding your intelligence. And I want to know why. Was it funny for you this whole time, huh? Making a fool out of the rest of us? Naruto opened his mouth to ask her what she was talking about, but a sudden arm gripping his ankle shut him up. He glanced down just in time to see Kaguya's hand disappear back into his shadow. We would advise thou to go along with her misconception, Kaguya said now that she had his attention. Thou art no longer the dead last everyone assumed thou to be. For appearance's sake, it would be wise to keep up this ruse for as long as possible. He didn't know how she wanted him to do that. Fighting was one thing because he actually had some power now, and if worse came to worse, then Kaguya could control his shadow and at least offer him backup. However, he couldn't fake smarts. Sure, he had gotten away with it in class earlier because Kaguya had literally been feeding him the information as he said it, and he had something to prove. But there was no way he could keep something like that up for an extended period of time, especially in front of someone genuinely good at studying like Sakura. For now he had no choice but to at least try. Sakura was expecting some kind of answer. He didn't have to say anything smart, he just had to say something that sounded cool, right? A lie would be enough, because no matter what he said it would be more believable to her than the actual truth anyways. Or maybe, it wasn't funny for me, Naruto answered, having intended to wing it as he went. You think I like being picked on as the dead last this whole time? I hated it, every single moment of it. Every joke, every time someone called me an idiot was so unbearable I wanted to scream. He had meant to tell a lie, but somehow instead he started telling her the truth. His truth. Some of it, at least. Then why? Sakura's gaze softened and even her voice lost the hard edge it used to have. It wasn't so much pity she looked at him with, but there was a hint of understanding. Of course, she knew what it was like to be bullied for being the smartest girl in class. If she had to choose between being bullied for being smart or being stupid, she would pick smart every time. At least that was something to be proud of. Do I really have to tell you why I might not want someone to see the real me? Those next words hit Sakura the hardest. Because she knew exactly what that was like. She too had opened herself up once. It was when she tried to show others her heart that the true bullying began. She put it all on the line for some boy, telling him how she felt. And he acted like he hadn't even heard her. No, it wasn't an act, he truly hadn't so much as even seen her. Sakura destroyed her friendships for him, and he didn't even acknowledge her existence. I'm sorry. Sakura turned back to her scroll, picking it up as if to start going over its contents. She knew how fake the attempt looked and there was no way she could concentrate on the studying after hearing him say all that. For what? Naruto asked, his voice bitter. For perhaps the first time Sakura had ever heard, he sounded truly regretful about the past and the way things turned out. He may have been one of the unsociables like her, but she always had the impression he had been trying his best until now despite everything. There was certainly no shame in that, even if things didn't go the way he had wanted. I guess I just misunderstood you this whole time. Actually, that's not true. Sakura felt herself laugh. It wasn't out of humor, but more out of self-spite. I never tried to understand you. I was afraid if I did, you would turn out to be just like Sasuke-kun. That was right, the boy she once had a crush on was the same one every other girl in the class liked. That was why she had been bullied. Because some normal girl without even a clan thought she could stand in the same ring as everyone else. Naruto snorted. What's so great about that jerk anyways? So what if he's a little strong? I could still beat him up. After the fight against Kiba today, Sakura actually wasn't all that sure he was bluffing. Before, she might have thought it was impossible. All the other girls definitely still did. Yet now, I hope you do, she said, and found herself surprised to feel that she meant it. Naruto blinked in shock. He hadn't expected the conversation with Sakura to go so well. She was actually being nice to him too. She didn't even laugh at him when he said he wanted to fight and beat Sasuke just now. He had assumed she liked him just like all the other girls, even if she was quiet about it. Now he wasn't so sure anymore. However, before their conversation could go any further, a stack of scrolls was dropped unceremoniously in front of them. Everything on Hatake Kakashi. The librarian from earlier deadpanned, her voice clipped and short. Anything else I can help you with? She asked, but they both knew it was a mere nicety at this point. That's all. Sakura responded, but it was almost like she hadn't even actually heard. Her nose was still buried in the scroll she had been looking at from earlier, but it wasn't just for appearances anymore, now genuinely studying the text inside in order to memorize the information. The librarian made a huff, but took the opportunity to go back to her other duties before Sakura could change her mind and ask for more. The whole time, and she didn't even glance at Naruto. Not that he cared. He was tired of adults that didn't acknowledge him. Unlike with students who disrespected him, he couldn't beat them up yet. He had a feeling he was getting dangerously close to slipping over the edge. However, burying the dangerous impulse for the time being, he started digging through the new pile of scrolls in front of him. I don't even know where to start with all this, he complained aloud. It would have been really nice if Kaguya could come back out of his shadow right now and just read it all for him. This one is probably as good a place as any. Sakura somehow picked a scroll out from the pile without even really looking at it. It was even more impressive considering she was still reading as she had done it. Naruto looked down at the scroll to see it was a list of old academy records, probably dating to around the time Kakashi had attended himself. Without much other choice, he decided to unroll it and start reading. For perhaps the first time in his life, he was willingly reading for the sake of gathering information. He had thought he would hate the idea, but somehow having Sakura next to him doing the same thing made it feel more bearable, as if it wasn't something he was doing alone, but rather with a friend. Maybe the library wasn't so bad, after all. If it was always like this, he wouldn't mind studying more often from time to time. Hatake Kakashi, student of the Yondaime Hokage. The hero of Kanobi Bridge. Sharingan warrior that copied over 1,000 jutsu. He was an incredibly accomplished ninja that held these titles and even more. He was also what Kaguya would refer to as an oversight. Such a renowned figure in Konoha's military should have been important information her will had looked into while it still had the chance. Yet it had overlooked him, because while he may have possessed a Sharingan eye, he wasn't actually an Uchiha, and as such wasn't a potential reincarnation for Indra. Apparently sometime during the last war, he had lost an eye and a fallen Uchiha teammate of his had offered his own as a replacement just before his death. That alone made him dangerous enough that he should have been taken into consideration far before now. That Sharingan of his could potentially be their undoing. Never mind Indra's current reincarnation that hadn't awakened his own true powers yet, this was the only man in the village with the potential to see Kaguya as she was. What was worse was he had already seen her outside of the shadow just the night before. Was it a mere coincidence? Kaguya would like to think so, but she couldn't leave that possibility to chance. That was why as soon as Naruto had finished gathering all the necessary information on Kakashi, she had him begin searching the village. They had to find him and get to the bottom of this before it was too late. If it wasn't already. I'm telling you, this is impossible, Naruto complained, landing on top of the roof of a wide building. He had been searching for Kakashi for a couple hours already, long enough for the sun to set and the waning moon to replace it in the night sky. First of all, I don't know how you expect me to find a single guy in this whole village, he continued to grumble, walking to the edge of the rooftop, placing his hands on the railings to lean over and scan the busy streets below. Dozens of people passed below every couple seconds. As far as he could tell, none of them were the man he was supposed to be looking for. We suppose this is a fool's errand indeed. Kaguya rose out of his shadow, taking her place next to Naruto to scan the surrounding vicinity with her Byakugan. Even the enhanced sight of 360 degrees for 50 meters in every direction wasn't enough to possibly locate him. The idea had just been to have Naruto go to numerous areas of the village when they were the most busy. In other words, somewhere he had the highest possibility of being if the only thing you considered was general statistics. From there, she would look for him using the all-encompassing vision of her Byakugan. So far that had proved pointless. Either Kakashi wasn't someone to usually come out in public, or worse, he didn't want to be found. If the latter was the case, then they were already too late. So we can finally give up? Naruto asked, glancing down at Kaguya. She nodded in agreement, the veins pulsating around the side of her head disappearing as she deactivated the Byakugan. Good, I want to get to learning better control of these Rinnegan. He flexed the eyes in the palms of his hands as he said that. Speaking of which, Kaguya also turned slightly to look at his hands. Thou showed greatly improved control today when fighting thy classmates. When did thou have time to learn such technique? It was far from perfect, but compared to last night even, Naruto had shown incredible discretion with the use of his eyes. So much so that not even the Hyuga girl who had been watching should have been able to realize what had happened. Naruto shrugged at the question. I don't know, really. I just kind of felt like I could do it, you know? It would appear Naruto was somewhat unnatural when it came to the use of his eyes, using them purely on feeling alone to such great results. Kaguya couldn't say she was displeased, but it was disconcerting that this was the first real time Naruto showed sudden growth. She supposed the Rinnegan awakening had also somehow awakened some kind of hidden potential in Naruto that had always laid dormant. Or perhaps he was just a late bloomer? These were the apologetic responses. The more pessimistic train of thought was Naruto's potential had been purposely sabotaged by everyone around him up until now, along with his confidence. Now that he had found himself, he was more easily able to tap into his true potential. What other kind of jutsu can you teach me? Naruto suddenly asked, slightly surprising Kaguya. She glanced up to see him uncharacteristically earnest. I can't rely on Mizuki-sensei or anyone else anymore. I've never even managed to learn a basic clone technique. I can use transformation just fine, but that was about it before now. You must have other awesome things you can show me, right? What about that bone bullet thing you do? Kaguya shook her head, despite knowing the disappointed look Naruto would make right after. Do not misunderstand. We would like to teach you more. It is simply not possible. The Haiketsu is a Kekkai Genkai much like the Byakugan, so it is not something that can be taught. For other techniques, while it is true we are the progenitor of all chakra, we do not possess the knowledge to teach what you desire. The number of basic techniques Kaguya knew was nearly zero. Her abilities were so great that there was never any need for her to learn lesser techniques, never mind that many of them didn't exist when she had been alive. As humanity continued to grow further and further from the source of chakra, they had to create many techniques to supplement the loss in power, quantity over quality, as it was. That was why she needed information from the Nara boy earlier to learn his jutsu. Shadow manipulation was a fascinating technique and beneficial to her in this weakened form. However, at full power she would have never had the need to create such a technique. This extended to many others' abilities, including the clone technique Naruto was now asking to be taught. Guess this means I'm back to square zero, huh? Naruto sighed, but accepted her words as the truth. He knew she had no reason to lie to him about such things. The stronger he got, the more beneficial it was for her as well. I really need to get the Bunshin no Jutsu down before the graduation exam too, otherwise I might fail. Well, that wouldn't be any good. If possible, I would like you to pass. A third voice from behind interrupted their conversation. A familiar voice that they had both heard for the first time yesterday. They spun around to find Kakashi crouched in the middle of the roof, holding one hand up in greeting. Yo, I understand that you have been looking for me? There was a sudden thunk as a small gray bullet made of bones struck him directly in the Chunin vest. The green material began to crumble and Kakashi leapt backwards, ash falling all around him as the vest turned to ash. TCH, Kaguya clicked her teeth. Her bullets were too small and weak to pierce through something designed to withstand kunai slashes and shuriken punctures, it would seem. Against civilians who didn't wear such things, a single bullet would be enough, but that wasn't going to be the case against those with more protection. At full power she would have shot bigger projectiles from the palm of her hand that consisted of bone made from her radius or ulna. As she could only generate a limited number of bones the size of her index finger. That would be enough. She had already destroyed his protection. With the next one she could finish him off. Wait, Kakashi started to say too late. She fired another bone bullet, and it sunk into his chest cavity. He started to crumble apart, at least for a moment, before he transformed into a log. Kawarimi no Jutsu? Naruto asked in surprise, simultaneously informing Kaguya of what had just happened. Like I was saying, the real Kakashi was to their left now, in the same crouching position he had been in as before. Aruji-sama. Pull him in. Kaguya wasn't going to wait for him to finish. He was already far too dangerous in existence for them, having snuck up on them while they were speaking. Who knew what he had overheard? That was without mentioning he had known they were looking for him in the first place. Bansho Tenin. Naruto reacted first, only thinking about it after it was too late. Until now, Kaguya had been the one to kill people. He hadn't helped her with that, she had done it all on her own. If he got involved like this, he could no longer claim innocence. He was about to become complicit in her murders. Whoa! Kakashi once again had his words cut off mid-sentence, Naruto's right palm pulling him towards the young blonde like a vortex. He flew through the air, arms and legs flailing behind him as if some invisible force had grabbed him by the chest and was pulling him forward. Kaguya smirked, shooting 3 more bone bullets. It was overkill, but she wasn't taking any more chances. Kakashi wasn't a jonin and considered a legendary ninja for nothing, however. Even when suddenly faced with a new ability he had never experienced before, he was able to react. His body twisted and turned, adjusting his limbs difficult but possible against the force of Naruto's Bansho Tenin. It was just enough, allowing him to barely dodge the bullets as they whizzed past him. He may have dodged the barrage, but he was far from safe just yet. Despite gaining some control over his trajectory, the final destination hadn't changed and he was on a direct collision course with Naruto. In mere moments the two would collide into one another. At least, they should have under normal circumstances. Naruto's shadow bent and twisted, shooting out halfway to merge with Kakashi's. The moment the two shadows connected and Kakashi's forward momentum was brought to a violent and sudden halt. His whole body jerked to a stop, giving him whiplash and temporarily stunning him. This ends now. Kaguya readied her last bullet. 6 shots was her limit. It wasn't a matter of a cooldown like Naruto's Rinnegan. She suspected in order to further create more bones she would have to wait for Naruto to intake calcium that she could then convert into her jutsu. So if this shot missed, they were going to have to find a different way to take Kakashi down. This was it. She fired her bullet. Kakashi, still suffering from the effects of whiplash, wasn't able to say or do anything as it pierced his exposed chest. Like before, he began to crumble apart, turning into gray ash. However, unlike before, he didn't turn into a log and just continued to fall apart as a human until the very end. In a matter of moments it was over and the legendary copy ninja was no more. That was all really dramatic. At least, that should have been the case. Yet from behind the ashes of the fallen Kakashi, a second one stepped out from the shadows and into the moonlight. Now then, can we talk? Or did you want to keep going? How? Naruto asked the same question Kaguya was thinking. That couldn't have been the Bunshin no Jutsu. Clones aren't real, they don't have solid form. Well, you aren't wrong about that. Kakashi raised both hands in front of himself, forming a seal of some kind. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. In a burst of smoke, a replica of Kakashi appeared to his left. These are shadow clones. He held one hand up towards the clone, who returned the gesture, their hands clapping together as they high-fived one another. Both of thou? Kaguya clarified, using her Byakugan to study Kakashi and his clone. There was no perceptual difference between them. They were completely the same, down to the chakra signature. If she hadn't seen him create a clone, she wouldn't have even known which was the original right now. If either one of them even was, I thought it might be best to not approach you in person. Considering how trigger-happy you are, Oju-chan. Kakashi answered, confirming her suspicion that neither one of them was the original. Under normal circumstances, Kaguya would call him out on his lack of decorum for not appearing before them himself. His good sense had saved his life, however. Seeing as how I'm still alive to finally explain that, I would guess you've run out of bullets? Perceptive too, it would seem. Kaguya-chan, what should we do? Naruto asked, but she didn't have an answer. Kakashi had completely outplayed them. Even if they could continue to fight him, they had no idea where the original truly was. He could be on the other side of the village for all she knew. As things are, we have no choice but to hear him out. Kaguya sighed, folding her arms and glaring at the two Kakashis. It would seem he came to us with the intention of bargaining for his life. It really helps me out if you understand that. Kakashi chuckled humorlessly, inclining his head as if bowing to them. The clone next to him disappeared a moment later. To be honest, I had no intention of approaching you at all so early, but once I figured out you were looking for me, I didn't exactly have much choice. So he really had been aware of the pursuit. No wonder they couldn't find him, even with her Byakugan. So then how does this work from here? Naruto asked, looking back and forth between Kaguya and Kakashi. He would never tell her, but he was happy they had failed to kill Kakashi with that last attack. The number of people who ever helped him was slightly growing, but it was still thin. He would rather not eliminate allies as quickly as he made them. Good question, Kakashi shrugged, turning his attention to Naruto. I should probably start by saying that I am on your side, Naruto. Or rather, I would like you to be on our side. Do not use wordplay in an attempt to deceive our Origi. Kaguya took a couple steps to the side, placing herself directly between Naruto and Kakashi. It was not mere whim upon which we decided to leave our Origi's shadow. Thou claim you want him to be thy ally, but we are here because our Origi has no ally in this village. If there had been even one person before now that tried to save Naruto, she wouldn't have ever come out. It was because no one did that she felt she had to. You're right, my bad. I should have started differently, after all. Kakashi continued to look at Naruto from over the top of Kaguya's head. This is why I apologized the other day, because I haven't been there for you as much as I should have been. However, you have to believe me when I say that I was very busy helping you out in other ways. He placed his arms by his sides and this time bowed properly before them. It is a pleasure to officially make your acquaintance. I am Hatake Kakashi, and for the past few years it has been my mission to watch over you and report any changes on your condition to Hokage-sama. He returned to an upright position before continuing. Having said that, I have been feeding the Hokage false information until now. For example, he still does not know about your existence, Oju-chan. I know you've been there since right around the time of the Uchiha incident. Rather, I knew something happened to Naruto's shadow at that time. It wasn't until last night I knew it was you. Wait, slow down. Naruto suddenly shouted, taking a couple steps forward. Before he could get too far, Kaguya held up an arm, urging him to stay back and not get much closer. You mean you've been keeping an eye on me all this time for the Hokage? But why? What interest would the Hokage have in someone like me? Thou already know the answer to that. Kaguya was the one who answered. Kyuubi no Yoko. Jinchuriki have infamously been used as weapons of mass destruction in past ninja wars. So it stands to reason the Hokage would want someone to keep an eye on now as the host of the strongest of those Biju. So you already know about that too, huh? Kakashi sighed, but nodded in affirmation to Kaguya's words. That's right, but I can't see Kyuubi's chakra mixing with Naruto's anymore. Haven't been able to since about the time Naruto's shadow changed. Even so, I never told Hokage-sama about this. It hasn't been easy. I've had to do a lot to make sure no one else found out about this either, even accidentally. You should be more grateful to me, Oju-chan. Grateful? Naruto asked, clenching his teeth so hard it sounded like they might break. What the hell is there to be grateful to a bastard like you for? You've seen how much I have been suffering this whole time, and you didn't do anything. You and the Hokage, none of you ever saw me for anything more than a fox. Isn't that right? That's wrong. Kakashi countered, voice quiet but stern. Maybe for Danzo-sama that is true, but for me it's different. Think about it, I've already known you haven't had the Kyuubi for years, but I've continued to protect your secret. I am not your enemy. Just because thou art not our enemy does not make thou our ally. Kaguya pointed out to him. However, perhaps we shall hear you out. Tell us the sequence of events so we may choose for ourselves whether or not to put our trust in thou. I guess that's the most I can ask for. Kakashi sighed, but agreed to continue. Let me start with the Kyuubi attack on the night of Naruto's birth. Frankly speaking, we believe Danzo-sama orchestrated that attack to kill the Yondaime Hokage and take his place. As you know, it was mostly successful, the Yondaime dying to place the Kyuubi inside an infant Naruto. Who is this we that thou speak of? Kaguya asked for clarification. We're a small organization of Umbu members known as Root. It was formerly a division run by Danzo-sama under the Sandaime's tenure, but when he became Hokage, it was disbanded. A couple of us revived it as a now anti-Danzo faction. I probably don't have to say, but its current existence is top secret. So secret he would trust me, its leader, with the mission of keeping an eye on Naruto's condition. Why you? Naruto asked, and to answer that question, Kakashi lifted the left side of his Hitai to reveal a Sharingan eye. This eye can control the flow of Kyuubi's chakra, at least in theory. He placed the Hitai back over his eye. At least, that's the official reason I was chosen. The truth of the matter is I volunteered for this mission. That's because, Naruto, you are a special person from the moment you were born, not because the Kyuubi no Yoko was placed in you, but from before that even. Naruto, you are the son of the Yondaime Hokage. Kaguya understood now. She had indeed thought it odd that Kakashi would have some interest in Naruto if not for the Kyuubi, but as a former student of the Yondaime, it made sense he would want to remain close to his son. That was why he continued to protect his secret even after, despite the fact that Naruto no longer offered any strategic value without the Kyuubi. I really am sorry I haven't been able to better protect you. Kakashi continued. Danzo-sama believes that a perfect Jinchuriki is one filled with hatred. This is why he had fake rumors spread about you being the fox incarnate, and made laws such as not telling your generation the truth. All to further isolate you and strengthen your own hatred. He hopes to one day use your hate to control the Kyuubi, and it's why I couldn't risk jeopardizing my position to help you, no matter how much I might have wanted to. Naruto had fallen silent, not reacting to any of the things Kakashi had been saying for several moments now. The truth was, he had stopped listening after being told he was the son of a former Hokage. How was he even supposed to react to this news? He didn't know. Should he be happy? His father had been some amazing existence, the leader of the village, for as short a time as it had been. Or would it be better to get angry? Because despite who his father had been, Naruto had been treated this badly the whole time. We understand the basics now, Kaguya said, her voice drawing his attention back down to her. He thought it was odd that he felt nothing, but looking at Kaguya now he knew why. Who his parents were didn't matter anymore. They hadn't been there for him when he needed them, but Kaguya was here now. Nothing else mattered. So? Kaguya continued. What would thou have us do? Certainly thou would not propose to make our Uruji the Hokage simply for his bloodline? As she understood it, that wasn't what a military dictatorship valued when picking their leaders. Although she would admit there had been some connection between all the previous leaders. No, nothing like that. Kakashi waved his hand as if to dismiss the idea. First of all, is it alright if I ask what exactly it is that you are, Oju-chan? I understand you live in Naruto's shadow. It would also seem that you somehow replaced the Kyuubi or perhaps evolved from it. There is also the matter of your Byakugan, same as the Hyuga clan. Honestly, any one of those things by themselves would be surprising, so you're a pretty incredible existence to try and pin down the nature of. We will give thou the same answer we gave our Origi. Kaguya straightened herself out, flicking her long white locks of hair dramatically as she placed both hands on her hips and raised her chin as if to look down on the taller man before them. "We are a mere moon rabbit, come down to this planet to eat demons. Thinking of us as that is enough. That's so?" Kakashi seemed to want to laugh, but didn't appear to know how in the face of such a serious way of saying something so ridiculous. "Well, I can't say I really get it, but that's good enough for now. As for what we want from Naruto, the plan was to have this conversation after he graduated. I submitted my application to withdraw from the Umbu and become a Jonin sensei not long ago. I would then take him on my team where I would be able to look after him more carefully." "Well, the order got a bit mixed up, but we can still go with that, right? It is not for us to decide." Kaguya turned to Naruto, looking up at him. "Origi-sama, what would thou have us do? We personally do not see the need to get involved in some power struggle between humans, but if thou desire it, we will abide by thy will." Naruto continued to stare at Kaguya for several moments, before slowly shifting his gaze to Kakashi. He still didn't like that this guy had abandoned him for all this time, but there was something even more than that he couldn't forget. "You said this Danzo guy was responsible for the death of my father? Along with my treatment up until now, right?" he clarified, Kakashi nodding to his question. "Then I guess I got no choice, I'm in." He didn't care about what had to happen to make it happen, but he finally had some kind of path for himself. He had gotten power, and now he had found a purpose for that power. Kakashi let out a sigh of relief. "That's good, on one condition." Naruto cut him off. "As it is, I might not even be able to graduate. Even if I get strong, it doesn't mean anything if I can't learn to make clones before the final exam. So before then, teach me. Not just the normal Bunshin no Jutsu. I need to be able to really surprise Mizuki-sensei and give him no reason to be able to fail me." So he inhaled deeply, pointing dramatically at the copy ninja. "Teach me the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." The day of the graduation exam was here, a day that Naruto had been preparing for over the past month. It wasn't just Kaguya that he had to rely on anymore. Certainly she continued to teach him late at night, just the two of them alone in the forests of Konohagakure no Sato. She praised his progress, often remarking he seemed to be a natural at using the power within his hands. The Rinnegan also wasn't the only tool he had in his arsenal anymore. Kaguya also taught him an ancient and forgotten martial arts style, one that she said would be considered the predecessor to the Hyuga's Juken style. In addition to that, he had been learning to fight with the blade she had stolen for him, a blade which Hatake Kakashi showed interest in. He wouldn't tell them why, but he seemed to have some knowledge about the white slash emitted from the blade when Naruto swung it. So in addition to teaching him how to make shadow clones, he instructed him in how to best make use of his sword. Naruto wasn't only getting stronger, but smarter over the past month too. Studying with Sakura after classes had become an unspoken tradition between the two, Naruto for the first time finding joy in being able to learn about history and even math, because for the first time he had someone to actually show interest in speaking with him about such things. Even during their weekly written exams, Naruto was slowly beginning to be able to answer the questions even without Kaguya's help. Of course, he was far from caught up to the rest of the class in that area, but compared to before, it was a remarkable improvement. All of it had been building to this day. The written tests were over, the practical field exam was complete, and now the only thing left was the jutsu application portion of the exams. Everything that came before it was pointless in the face of this exam. If you passed this, it didn't really matter how you did on everything else. You could become a genin. In that same respect, if you failed, that was it. You would never graduate. Haruno Sakura, step forward, Mizuki called. All of the students were lined up in the front of the classroom. Mizuki sat behind his desk, clipboard in hand. Placed on the desk in front of him was a spread of hitayate identical to the one on his head. "Good luck," Naruto whispered to Sakura as she stepped forward to perform the jutsu that would determine her future career. "Save some for yourself." Sakura shot back, softly enough for only him to hear. Well, that wasn't entirely true. Him and one other person that happened to have been right next to them. "When the heck did you two start getting along?" Shikamaru asked, genuinely curious for once. It wasn't a surprise that he hadn't been aware of the change between the two. Outside of the library and everything was business as usual. Which meant they never talked to one another, acting as they always did. Until that little exchange, at least. "Wanna make a trade for information again?" Naruto joked, smirking sideways at Shikamaru. "Heh, no thanks." Shikamaru shook his head, but couldn't fight down the slightly rising smile. He didn't know what had happened with Naruto over the past month, but he hadn't just gotten stronger and smarter but more confident too. As he was now, Shikamaru couldn't say he disliked him. He might even say they could be friends, if it wasn't for the fact that making friends was a pain. Bunshin no Jutsu. Sakura unleashed her technique, cutting off any further conversation between the two. 3 clones popped into existence around her, each and every one of them a perfect replica indistinguishable from the original. The highest number of perfect clones anyone had performed until now. "Well done, Haruno." Mizuki nodded and gestured to the hitayate on the desk. "You pass. Go ahead and take your official mark as a genin of Konohagakure no Sato." She stepped forward and grabbed the nearest one, holding it in her hand as she took her spot in line next to Naruto. Next up is Uchiha Sasuke. Mizuki continued down the list. As Sasuke began to walk forward, he sent a quick glare in Naruto's direction, one which Naruto all too readily returned. Despite having been hoping for it, Naruto never did get to have his match against Sasuke. So now the time to settle the score for who was best was going to come down to this: which one of them could produce the most clones. Bunshin no Jutsu. Sasuke unleashed the same technique, producing 6 perfect replicas of himself. That was double the number of Sakura just before him, who had been the highest score in the class before now. Excited whispers broke out from a majority of the students, awe and shock sweeping through most of them, as expected of the Uchiha heir. Mizuki nodded for Sasuke to come forward and take his Hitite. It went without saying, but he had of course passed. Everyone knew there was no chance that Sasuke could possibly fail. The same, however, could not be said for the next one to have their name called to come forward. Uzumaki Naruto. Mizuki glanced nervously at Naruto as he began to walk towards the center. The hushed whispers from earlier continued. If you had asked them all a month ago, everyone would have thought for sure the dead last would fail. That had slowly begun to change as Naruto's fortune suddenly seemed to turn around. He was no longer the dead last that failed every test and lost every match. He was something else now. What exactly that was, no one could be sure. The bullying had stopped, but that didn't mean everyone suddenly started treating Naruto with respect. It was more of a cautious anxiety, like he was some dangerous animal that had escaped its cage at the zoo. Rumors had started spreading after 3 in the class had ended up in the hospital and had to be withdrawn from the academy. There was no proof, but everyone suspected it had been Naruto. The true test of Naruto was now. Despite how much he had changed recently, everyone knew that cloning was the thing he had the most difficulty with before now. If he had managed to overcome even that hurdle, then the old Naruto they thought they knew was truly gone. A thought that terrified most of them, whether they would admit it or not. Naruto didn't care about any of that anymore. The academy was just a stepping stone for him now. Before, it had been his chance to make friends and become stronger. Neither of those things had happened during his time here. It was only after Kaguya showed up that things had started to change. Now he knew the truth about his treatment and the cause of his suffering. That was why he would pass, and then he would join Kakashi in order to get his revenge. If he had any regrets, it would be that he didn't get to go head-to-head against Sasuke, but that too was fine. Because he was about to upstage him right now. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto formed a hand seal different than everyone else had. There was a surge of chakra greater than everything before, and next to Naruto there were 6 loud pops. From within the burst of smoke, 6 clones of Naruto appeared. They all stepped forward, the sound of their feet stepping on the ground making an audible noise. Impossible Mizuki's clipboard clattered to the floor. All the murmuring from before was gone. Before them, Naruto hadn't just created the same number of clones as Sasuke had, he performed a much more complicated version of those clones. Ones that were real, physical beings. Clones capable of more than just a distraction, but use in actual combat. Naruto didn't wait for Mizuki to tell him he had passed or failed. He simply walked up to the desk as his clones popped out of existence, and grabbed one of the Hitite for himself, wrapping it around his forehead. When Mizuki didn't even attempt to stop him, Naruto smirked at his Chunin-sensei. He then walked back, taking his place in line between Shikamaru and Sakura. I would say I'm surprised, but nothing really can shock me at this point, Shikamaru grumbled, rubbing the back of his head and letting out a long, drawn-out sigh. Guess you didn't need that luck after all. Sakura smirked sideways at Naruto, who returned the expression. Congratulations, she added as an afterthought. Hey, you too. Naruto nodded at her before also glancing over to Shikamaru. Both of you. I know it wasn't much, but I think of you guys as the closest thing to having friends that I got. In the end, and he couldn't throw away that part of him that wanted bonds completely. Even now he still secretly hoped for them, even if he would try and deny that part of himself. Oi! Don't get sappy on us at the end. Shikamaru adjusted his gaze, unable to look Naruto head-on after his embarrassing confession. Just so you know, of everyone in class, you were the least of a pain in my ass. Naruto grinned, letting out a loud chuckle. That so? He asked. Both of you are still idiots. Sakura shook her head, but smiled all the same. But sitting next to you guys did make class somehow more bearable, so thanks for everything up until now. Mizuki cleared his throat, ending any further conversation among the 3 of them and everyone else in the class. He had collected his dropped clipboard and stood up straight in front of them all now. Congratulations to everyone for passing the exam. From this day forward, you are all ninja of Konohagakure no Sado. The next time we meet will be in this room a week from now. At that time, you will receive your team assignments and meet your Jonin-sensei. Until then, dismissed. Sir, yes sir. Everyone replied. A moment later and all the tension dissipated as the students began conversing casually amongst themselves, making their way to the door as they did. Shikamaru and Sakura also began to make their way for the door, but Naruto held back. Neither one of them seemed to notice, as they were no doubt eager to go outside and meet their parents. Almost everyone had somebody to celebrate with, and show off their success to everyone except Naruto and one other. As even Mizuki left the room, those two were left alone. While Naruto assumed at first it was just because they were the only two orphans, it seemed to be Sasuke had intentions other than that. "Start talking, loser," Sasuke said, leaning against the door and glaring at him. "Where did you get that power from? Figure it out for yourself, jackass." Naruto shot back, starting to stalk forward. Before he could get past the door, Sasuke moved, standing in his way. "I'll beat it out of you, if that's what it takes." The Uchiha survivor sneered down at Naruto, the hate rolling off of him strong enough to emit its own odor. "Nothing stands in the way of me and my revenge, and if there is something out there able to give you power as fast as you've obtained it, then I need it. It's called hard work. Something you wouldn't know about." Naruto reached forward to shove him aside when Sasuke grabbed him by the wrist. He squeezed as if intending to break it, exerting enough pressure that caused even Naruto to flinch. "I won't ask again." Sasuke was deathly serious, Naruto realized. Which was fine by him. He may have just showed him up with his clones, but he had been looking for an opportunity to kick his ass too. Now it had finally presented itself to him. "You're gonna have to beat it out of me." Naruto leaned forward, knocking his forehead against Sasuke's. Not terribly hard, but within force to shock the Uchiha and get him to loosen his grip on Naruto's wrist. For a split second, it looked like Sasuke was about to retaliate on the spot, clenching both hands into fists and beginning to wind up. He caught himself at the last possible second, releasing his pent-up breath in a long sigh before nodding behind him. "Not here. Let's go somewhere the teachers won't stop us," Sasuke said. He didn't wait for an answer before turning around and stalking out of the classroom, heading the opposite way everyone else had gone. Perfect. Naruto followed after him and the two soon snuck out the back of the academy, making their way into the forest located behind it. As far as Naruto could tell, no one was coming after them. "Ariji-sama," Kaguya whispered to him from within the shadow. "This is an excellent opportunity for us to eliminate Indra's reincarnation. This man will one day be trouble for us in the future. It is imperative we make good use of this fortune." Kaguya had been waiting for a chance just like this, ever since she had discovered the identity of Indra's newest host. So long as he was killed now, and Naruto himself didn't perish, the next cycle wouldn't begin, and there would be nothing left with the strength to seal her yet again. "No," Naruto whispered back, harshly enough to shock her. "I'm gonna kick his ass first, and make sure he knows once and for all that I'm better than him. Until that happens, don't interfere." There it was, the curse of the two brothers bearing its fangs. Naruto didn't even realize that he was being manipulated by Azura's ghost, who still sought to continue his fight against Indra. All the same, Kaguya would allow it for the moment. She just had to be patient a little longer. So long as she allowed Naruto to stifle his inferiority complex, she would be able to make her move without any problem. Just until the end of their fight. That was how long she would wait. "Talking to yourself again, failure?" Sasuke called over the back of his shoulder. He must have noticed Naruto frequently grumbling to himself over the past month, having no idea he was actually speaking to someone within his shadow. Still, it was to their benefit for now that he hadn't realized the truth. "Just psyching myself up to finally kick your ass," Naruto retorted, punching a fist into his open palm. He had gotten good at coming up with convenient reasons for why he always talked to himself. Something he wouldn't have to do if he would just learn a more discreet way to communicate with her. "Humph, only in your dreams, you loser." Sasuke finally stopped walking, having already led them far enough away from the academy that there shouldn't be anyone to bother them, or accidentally stumble upon their little match. "Now come, I will beat those secrets out of you." He held up his hand, forming the seal of confrontation. "The only loser here is about to be you." Naruto returned the gesture. The moment he did was when Sasuke attacked, closing the distance between them before Naruto even had a chance to lower his seal. A month ago, and Naruto would have been too slow to react to such an underhanded and aggressive assault without Kaguya's assistance by way of controlling his shadow. The Naruto of today was much different than what he had been back then, and such an attack now was all too easy for him to counter. Sasuke's fist flew at him in a wild haymaker. Naruto simply raised his hand, slapping Sasuke's arm away and deflecting the punch to the side. In the same movement he jabbed at Sasuke with an open palm. Sasuke blocked with his forearm. He then swung his free arm in from the side. Naruto leaned back, dodging the chop by a hair's breadth. Sasuke knocked Naruto's fist back, unleashing a barrage of punches. Naruto didn't back down from such an assault, catching each fist that flew at him like gunfire, not letting a single one past his guard. As if realizing his attack wasn't working, Sasuke pulled back, spinning around and swinging at Naruto in a low kick. Naruto again simply deflected, sticking his knee out and catching the kick with a soft bunt. The sudden shift threw Sasuke off balance. Not for long, just a split second. It was enough, however. Naruto pressed in, jabbing Sasuke in the shoulder with an open palm. Sasuke made a grunt, left eye flinching shut from the impact. That was the deciding moment. Unable to see Naruto's wild haymaker coming from this sudden blind spot, Sasuke was also unable to defend against it. "Gh!" He let out a loud grunt, eating the full weight of Naruto's fist. The Uchiha flew to the ground, collapsing to a heap as Naruto bested him in one-on-one hand-to-hand combat. Just like that, and the match was decided. At least, had this been an academy-sanctioned fight, Mizuki would have called such a blow the conclusion. That was where Naruto made his mistake, assuming that Sasuke would accept this as the end. He bent down towards his defeated opponent, offering him the seal of reconciliation. It was at that moment that Sasuke's hand came forward, grabbing Naruto by the wrist and pulling him down. Naruto didn't even have a chance to realize what was happening. One moment the fight was over, and he was giving his opponent a hand up. The next, and he was face down on the ground. Sasuke holding his right arm with both hands, his knee placed on Naruto's back with enough force to keep him pinned. Now Sasuke grinned, blood oozing out from his busted lip. "You're going to talk or I'm going to break your arm." He twisted, not enough to break it just yet, but enough that Naruto knew with just a little bit more pressure it would snap. It would be that easy, and this wasn't no bluff. Sasuke really intended to go that far, all in order to find out where his power came from. Naruto couldn't help it. He laughed. "You really want my power that badly, Sasuke?" He didn't even have to turn his head to see the boy that had him pinned down. The Rinnegan eye on his left hand opened up, pushing aside the fabric of the glove to look back at the Uchiha for him. "Then you can just fucking have it," he unleashed the Shinra Tensei. Sasuke was suddenly lifted off his feet, sent flying backwards with enough force that the world around him became nothing more than a blur. It all came to a violent and abrupt stop not moments later, as his back smashed against the trunk of the nearest tree. The wind was knocked from his lungs and he sunk to the ground in a lifeless heap. It was at that moment that Kaguya finally saw her chance. Before Naruto could say or do anything, she rose out from his shadow, hand already formed into a finger gun pointed at the downed Uchiha. "Kaguya-chan!" Naruto called too late. She fired the shot, the bullet hitting Sasuke in the chest only a moment later. As he was, dazed from having his head collide with the trunk of the tree, he didn't even have time to realize what happened before he crumbled into ash, becoming nothing more than a gray pile on the forest floor. Just like that he was gone. The last surviving Uchiha of the village, top student of their class, and Naruto's secret rival for all this time, a pile of ash. "It had to be done," Kaguya said simply, not regretting the action for a second. "As does this." While she spoke, Naruto's shadow began to move, bending to Kaguya's will as it became thinner, stretching itself to the limits to slip behind the edge of a nearby tree. "Eep!" A sudden cry called out from beyond Naruto's sight. He had thought nobody had been following them, but that was wrong. Kaguya had to have known there was someone there from the beginning because of the power of her Byakugan, but she kept quiet this whole time. She had intentionally allowed him to think they were alone, but in reality that wasn't the case at all. As Kaguya took a couple steps to the side, the intruder upon their battle was revealed, being forced into mimicking Kaguya's movements. "Hinata?" Naruto whispered, just as surprised as the girl now caught in his shadow seemed to be. This was the second time she had been caught spying on him as he battled. For what reason, he still didn't understand. However, unlike before, this time she had seen too much. As such, she couldn't be allowed to leave. Wait, for the second time he was too slow. Kaguya had already fired the second bullet, this one digging into the Hyuga girl bound by their shadow. No, no, no! Naruto's brain rushed, trying to come up with some solution. Something that could save her. It was impossible, he knew that. There was no surviving one of those little ashen bullets. If you were hit by it you would die. That was a determined fact. Naruto-kun Hinata attempted to call out to him, reaching her hand forward. That was the last thing she ever did, that outstretched hand turning to ash and crumbling to the floor just seconds before the rest of her followed after. The tears threatening to fall from her eyes were the last thing of Hyuga Hinata that Naruto ever saw. After that, she was simply a pile of gray ash on the forest floor, the same as Sasuke now was. He collapsed to his knees, staring at the spot where Hinata had just been moments before. "Why?" he asked, voice hoarse. She wasn't going to tell anyone. It was Hinata that had witnessed him before when fighting those boys from class. With her word, he could have just as easily been the one kicked out of the academy. Yet she had kept her promise, and told no one it had been him. She had protected him, then why was it any different now? "Thou art too naive, our Origi-sama. This and that are two different matters." Even if she wouldn't have betrayed thou willingly, leaving her alive would only be a liability. Kaguya answered, her voice taking no pleasure in what she had just done. Aside from Uchiha Sasuke, who had to be eliminated for her own safety, taking care of Hyuga Hinata had been for the sake of her master. Even if he couldn't understand that. Kaguya walked towards Naruto, taking his chin in her hands and turning him to face her. "Thou need trust no one but us. Do thou understand?" she asked of him. Naruto was silent, tears slowly rolling down his cheeks as he tried and failed to comprehend even basic speech. What she was saying should have been a simple truth. Easy for anyone to comprehend. Yet for some reason, he wasn't able to. Sasuke had been his rival, someone for him to defeat one day in the future. Not like this, struck down before their true match could ever be determined. However, that was something Naruto could forgive. Kaguya had her reasons for wanting Sasuke gone, even if they were beyond his comprehension. Hinata, however, was a different matter. She had only ever wanted to help him. He understood that now, only after it was too late. What he had mistaken for fear this whole time was something else. What it was he still didn't understand, but that was only because she was the first one to ever look at him that way. He knew, though, that Kaguya had just taken his soulmate away from him. We are the only one thou need now. Kaguya repeated her earlier words, stronger this time. It was then that Naruto understood what she was saying.